John Joyce is here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry we missed that. Hello.
I know where he is, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, excellent.
I think he's got some things that they need to take action.
Sorry we missed your speech.
Isn't that what everybody's here for?
What?
Isn't that what everybody's here for?
Yeah, their roll call. Give him the word.
I was saying, starting, good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the participation it looks like we have on the floor and at the commission and the Select Water Commission. With that, I would like to call this meeting to order, and we will do a roll call.
Larry Suker.
Here.
Kellen Lancaster. Here. Mike Purcell, here. Gerald Geis. Here. Clinton Glick. Here. Ron Cayley. Here. Mark Cott.
Here.
Sheridan Little.
Here.
Rod Wagner.
Here.
Bill Yankee.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a full commission, so we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Purcell, Commissioner Purcell. With that, we'll start with an audience introduction. Oh, yeah, we want the commission to take their role, if they would, at this time, the Select Water Commission.
Please, Josh.
Roll call.
Senator Agar.
Excused.
Senator Anselmi Sullivan.
Present.
Senator Dockstader. Here. Senator Driscoll. Here. Senator Lees.
Here.
Representative Blake.
Here.
Representative Eklund.
Here.
Representative Hunt.
Excused.
Representative Paxton.
Excused.
Representative Simpson.
Excused.
Chairman Hicks.
Here. He's excused.
Here.
Or should I say there's no excuse? With that, we will start on the audience introduction. If we could start with our attorney.
Thank you. Andrew Coleman with the Attorney General's Office.
Ogden Driscoll, Senate District 1.
Dan Larson, House District 25.
Larry Hicks, Senate District 11.
John Eklund, House District 10.
Rod Wagner, Wyoming Water Development, District 1.
Bill Yankee, Wyoming Water Development, Division 3.
Mark Cott, Water Development, District 4.
Kellen Lancaster, Water Commission, District 4 as well.
Mike Purcell, I'm the at-large member of the commission.
Larry Suker, District 2.
Gerald Geis, District 3.
Sheridan Little, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Water Division 2.
Ron Cayley, District 1.
Clinton Glick, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Wind River.
Dan Dockstader, Senate District 16, Lincoln, Teton, Sublette counties.
Lisa Anselmi Dalton, Sweetwater County, Senate District 12.
Glenn Moniz, Senate District 10, Albany County.
Stan Blake, House District 39, Sweetwater County.
Katie Talbot, Water Development Office. Abigail Burnwines, LSO.
Josh Anderson, LSO. Jason Mead, Water Development Office.
Brandon Gebhardt, Water Development Office.
Brian Clarkin, Water Development Office.
Barry Lawrence, Water Development Office.
Mike Mackey, Northwest Rural Water District. Cody Collins,
Mike Zimmer, Public Works Director, Guernsey, Wyoming.
Kate Farmer, Treasurer for the Guernsey, Wyoming.
Paul Brooks, Mayor of Sundance.
Kathy Lentz, Clerk Treasurer for the City of Sundance.
Jeff Rosenland, Dow.
Dick Millsacker with Powell. Kevin Boyce, Water Development Office.
Greg Kerr, University of Wyoming Office of Water Programs.
Jody Green, Water Development Office.
Gerald George, Mayor of Burlington.
Lee Allen, Public Works Director, Town of Burlington.
John Joyce, Martin Regional Joint Powers Board. Levi Hanson, City Utilities Department. Mike Holt, City of Gillette.
Brad Brooks, City of Cheyenne.
Frank Strong, City of Cheyenne.
Peter Clark, Mayor of Manchester.
Brian Seppi, Green River Joint Powers Board.
Chase DeVille, Water Development Office.
Colt Rodeman, La Perelle Irrigation.
And
Sprinkler, Upper Irrigation.
Pete Roush, Respect Consulting.
Corey Foreman, HDR. Randy Rumpler, Public Works Director, Glen Rock.
Ray Catalier, Town Engineer, Town of Glen Rock.
Martin Curry, Laramie River Conservation District, Laramie, Wyoming.
Willie Bridges, Prior Mountain Engineering.
Teresa Pregnell, Public Works Director, Townwood Range.
Mark Hines, Rudell.
As a completion, I want to welcome again everyone for the attendance of this meeting. We'll start with our approval of the minutes for October 4th, 2019 minutes.
I'd move the minutes on October 24th.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Little. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Next item of business is our planning amendments. And we will call on our fearless director for those
Mr. Chairman.
items.
We've got 4 planning amendments, and I will let Jason present the 4 amendments to you. I'd also remind you, Mr. Chair, that we've got 2 items on the agenda, numbers 8 and 9, that will require Select Water Committee action.
Thank you, I'm aware of that.
Thank you.
Just remind me so I don't leave them out.
So, Mr. Chairman, the first amendment that is for your consideration is for the Alkali Creek, and this is under tab MC, first tab MC in your white notebooks. Sorry about that. So the first one is for the Alkali Creek Reservoir Project third-party NEPA contractor services. So as you recall, Alkali Creek Reservoir, been working on it for a decade plus from the beginning. But to go through the NEPA, BLM was the lead federal agency. We hired the third-party NEPA contractor to complete the NEPA and the environmental impact statement on behalf of the BLM and the Corps of Engineers. The EIS was finished up and finalized in May of this year, and we've got a favorable record of decision from the BLM that we received in October of this year. So currently we have a right-of-way permit offer in hand that we just need to sign. And we're holding off on the Corps permit for several reasons, which I'll probably get to this afternoon. But this amendment is just a time extension amendment on that third-party NEPA contractor. And the reason for that is when we went through the NEPA process and part of the 404 permitting, you got to get a 401 certification to comply with water quality standards. And we have E. coli impairment downstream of the potential reservoir site. And there was some concerns by EPA that by removing water in the springtime, that we're going to be lessening the dilution of that E. coli. And as a result of that, DEQ, to kind of appease and comfort the EPA, I guess, we implemented an adaptive management plan to, if there are any potential issues into the future once the reservoir is built, then this adaptive management plan talks about best management practices that can be implemented to take care of those. So in advance of that, we need to do some baseline water quality monitoring. We're working with the South Bighorn Conservation District to do that. We have to provide some of those reports at the end of the year to the BLM and the DEQ. So we want to keep the contractor or the consultant that we have for that third party on board for another year to get us through that and really get us to the finish line on this project, and we're ready to build it. So for things that come up like that. And there's some other stipulations that came out of the EIS as well in regards to stream quantification tool, because we are inundating an intermittent stream, and cultural resources and some fishery stuff that we'll work through with Game and Fish. So we want to have that expertise at our disposal. So this is a time extension amendment going from June 30th of 2020 to December 31st of 2021. So with that, we'd ask for your favorable consideration.
Any discussion prior to a motion?
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question
Yes, Larry.
for Jason. Does that have a TMDL on it?
Mr. Chairman, yes, it does.
Okay, and then the second question, is it DEQ that's requiring the stream quantification tool, or is that something that the Corps has suggested that we do?
Mr. Chairman, that's the Corps of Engineers.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Chairman, I'll go ahead and move. We accept the amendment.
Second.
Been moved by Sheridan Little, Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner Geis to accept this. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, the next amendment for your consideration is the LaPrelle Irrigation District Rehab Level 2 study. This is amendment number 1. This is what we talked about in a workshop yesterday, where we're simply, I guess, putting some scope on hold or removing it as part of the rockfall analysis. And since we've come up with these other potential concerns with the structural integrity of some of the buttresses of the dam, we're going to go that route, and that's really just to include that scope. And then, as we talked about yesterday, we'll have a recommendation tomorrow, it's in account 2, for additional funds then to backfill that contract for the rockfall analysis, the original scope. So with that, I would ask if there's any questions. We do have the consultant that was here yesterday. This is with Respec, and they're not going to be here tomorrow. So would prefer, if there's any questions whatsoever, that we get those answered pretty much now at this time rather than tomorrow, because we won't have that technical expertise here tomorrow. Or if you have any questions for Chase, we can bring him up as well.
Any questions either by the select water or the commission? You don't want to vote on this then until tomorrow?
Mr. Chairman, we do. Yeah, you'll
You
have to
want one
vote to
now?
accept the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the amendment.
Second.
Been moved by Been moved and seconded that we accept this amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, the third amendment is for the Levitt Reservoir Expansion Project third-party NEPA contract, and that's with AECom. Same discussion we just had on Alkali Creek. They completed the EIS on behalf of the BLM and the Corps of Engineers. It was basically on a parallel path with Alkali Creek slightly in front of. Got the final EIS completed in May of this year, and then we had a record of decision, actually a joint record of decision in this case, because we went through with the compensatory mitigation plan for wetlands. And we received that in October, and we've got the 404 permit and the BLM right-of-way in hand. We just need to sign them. So again, this is just for, we're dealing with another impaired stream here for E. coli downstream of the project. Same concerns as were for alkali from EPA, which resulted in this adaptive management plan. And we want to keep that consultant on board so we can complete the baseline monitoring and anything else we need to do to get ready for construction. So with that, we'd ask for your favorable consideration on that. We're simply going from December 31st of this year to December 31st of 2021 on the time extension for that contract.
Move that amendment.
It's been moved.
On the Levitt Reservoir.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Little. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And Katie, I was wondering, did you get the last one, Purcell and Yankee? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Sure.
This is the first time in my career I've heard about E. coli being an issue, a downstream issue on any dam construction. Is there, what's unique about these two that E. coli would be evident downstream?
Mr. Chairman, without the reservoir there, the way it sits today, there's an E. coli impairment. So it's already has had a TMDL completed. The concern from the EPA is that by removing spring runoff water, which dilution is the solution to pollution, and we've all heard that, that we are removing that clean water that would normally dilute that in the springtime. Therefore, the E. coli concentration could increase. Our argument all along has been, well, we should be not talking about concentrations, we should be talking about load. The reservoir is not contributing load. And what state of Wyoming under statute has the right to divert water and put water to use, and that's right in the Clean Water Act. But to appease everybody, this adaptive management plan seemed reasonable to basically keep an eye on it. If there's ever a spike, we've got baseline information. We can determine if that spike is caused by the project, the reservoir, or not. And if it is, we implement some BMPs. If it's not, we don't have to do anything. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, the last amendment is for Sheridan Municipal Watershed Wildfire Hazard Mitigation Assessment, Amendment Number 1. Jody Pring talked about this yesterday, and it's simply a time extension from December 31st, 2019 to June 30th of 2020. And we want to add in the areas above Dayton and Ranchester into that study. So this gets us through, this time extension gets us through the legislative session, and if, we'll be hearing the recommendation for the additional funding of $120,000. I believe that's today. I can't remember which account it came out of, but anyway. And then if we're successful in the legislature getting that additional money next March before we now expire on this time extension, we'll amend it again for the additional funds into that existing contract. So with that, we'd ask for your favorable recommendation or consideration on this time extension.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Commissioner Weaver and seconded by Commissioner Geis. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I hear a motion carried. With that, we'll go to item number 6, and that's closeout of our planning projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've got 2 closeout planning projects, the Big Laramie River Oasis Ditch Diversion Rehabilitation Level 2 study and the Hanover Irrigation District Bighorn Flume Replacement Study Level 2. For the first closeout, I will bring Mr. Chase Tavelli up to present that closeout memo. No, he didn't.
Supposed to be in, I think. According to
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, my name is Chase Tavelli. I'm a member of the Water Development Office, and I'm here to present the closeout memo for the Big Laramie River Oasis Ditch Rehabilitation Level 2 study. This was a 2018 session approved project appropriation of $95,000. The consultant was Short Elliott Hendrickson Incorporated. The original contract amount was $94,456.10. The final contract amount was $91,689.34 for a contract savings of $2,766.76. There's a picture on your closeout memo that's kind of helpful to look at. This is a very old diversion structure. It is relied upon by the district as their sole means for diverting water out of the Big Laramie River. It's in disrepair. It's a cobbled together, a lot of cobbled together stone and concrete in the overflow section. A lot of issues with it. There's sedimentation problems. Excuse me. The sponsor has another issue. They provide water to a landowner that is not part of the district. We call that the Smith property. Basically, the dam and the first section of the ditch, I'm not sure, I think it's a half a mile around the Smith property, so there's an agreement that's very old that they will help deliver water to the Smith property. So as part of this study, currently they divert out of the ditch in 3 different locations, the Smith property does. And the ditch has to be kept really full because their inverts, the Smith inverts, are above the inverts of the ditch. And that creates a little bit of a wasted water issue to keep the ditch full so that Smith can divert. So they asked that we look at alternatives for improving that water delivery. They also live a long way away. The district members live quite a ways away from the head gate, and the river fluctuates dramatically, and it's very difficult to get out there and maintain flow so that they're meeting their diversion requirements. They also, to potentially help with funding, asked us to go ahead and look at fish passage. So we spoke to the Game and Fish, and they were obviously very excited about that potential. So the consultant developed 12 different alternatives addressing each one of those items separately, and came up with versions of adding certain chunks together. And the preferred alternative is to do all of the additions. And the sponsor has acquiesced to seek funding for a level 3 study to do that. So there'll be a reconstruction of the diversion dam and the overflow section. The overflow section is where you see the whitewater, and as well as the training dike. Construct a new sluiceway, which will help with the management of sedimentation. Provide for fish passage. It'll be pretty rudimentary kind of boulder structures. Remove the existing trash racks and replace them with new ones that are at an angle that's more conducive to removing trash. Construct log booms to help with debris flow and add SCADA. Additionally, there'll be a new head gate, which is called the Smith diversion, and that's tentative at this point, and I'll explain why. We had a public hearing June 18th at the fire station number 3 in Laramie, and we did receive one comment letter during the public hearings comment period, and that should be behind this closeout memo. It's Dan Smith, who represents the Smith property, obviously. His concerns, if I can try to summarize it for you, there wasn't enough design in the level 2 for his particular head gate, so the elevation of the invert and the size. We explained to him that those are things that take place in level 3 design, not necessarily a level 2. He also had some concerns about the length of the sheet piling and potential flooding to his property, and generally communication between the district and him. However, yesterday or the day before, the district was able to sit down with Mr. Smith, and they came to an accord. He would just like to have his input be accepted during the construction, and if need be, if they have to go back to operating the way they always have, that he's okay with that as well. We were supposed to receive a letter from Smith, from his attorney. I haven't received that yet, or it would be in front of you. So this year, the district applied for level 3 funding for the design and construction of the level 2 report's preferred alternative to replace the existing diversion dam, to include a rehabilitation of the overflow segment, a new sluiceway, fish passage, training dike improvements, installing trash and debris management, installing SCADA, and adding an additional head gate. The office has prepared a level 3 funding recommendation for the eligible components of this project for the commission to consider during this meeting. The consultant determined that this project is in the public interest, and the project functions and services cannot realistically be provided by any person, association, or corporation engaged in private enterprises. Mr. Chairman, I'm ready for any questions.
Commissioner, or Senator Hicks?
Mr. Chairman, Chase, when the consultant looked at that dealing with the Smith head gate, this is a pretty common occurrence around the state of Wyoming. It's one of the alternatives that they looked at to move that point of diversion upstream.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that was ever considered as an alternative. It would probably have to go a pretty long distance upstream. I'm assuming. You know, they've got
That invert on the ditch is quite a bit higher than the crest or the invert on the diversion structure.
the invert of the ditch?
Yeah.
No, it's lower than the crest.
Okay.
It's lower than the crest, yeah.
Chairman? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chase, obviously this has a private partner in it, and he's not part of the district, Mr. Smith and the Smith Properties. How long was that contract for that was initially signed? I'm just curious. And second, is he contributing at all to this project, and what benefit is he receiving? I guess there's three parts to the question.
Mr. Chair, the agreement dates back to October 21st of 1911. It looks like this. It's in handwriting. It's very, very interesting. The district felt that it was important to assume the cost of an extra head gate within their project just to help out the Smith property. That would require that Smith put in pipe or potentially a line ditch, extra length of ditch to get to where his first turnout would be. So it's kind of the district providing something for Smith to help his situation as best as possible. What was the third part of the question? I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Okay, Chase, the final one was, is he contributing to the cost, and when did the contract end? What were the terms in that handwritten document from 10/21/11? First of all, did it have a term, and is this private citizen contributing since he's not a member of the district?
He's not contributing. The district is going to take on the cost themselves.
Chairman, follow up?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Follow up, Mr. Chair? Yes. So if he's not contributing, what benefit is this private citizen receiving from these funds?
Mr. Chair, the hope is that he'll be able to have a more regular diversion and that he can divert when he wants to. One of the issues is that when the district is ready to irrigate, they want to lower their ditch so that they don't have water in it, essentially. When they lower their ditch, it's hard for Mr. Smith to get water into his diversions because they're at a higher elevation. So this head gate will allow him to basically operate when he wants to. He can go turn his head gate.
Chairman? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does the contract have an end date in that handwritten piece of paper that we have not seen? I have not seen.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe that there's an end date to the contract. Not that I've seen.
Mr. Chairman,
Actually, you have the floor.
in your previous testimony, you indicated that the district wanted to do this to improve their operations and save water. This isn't a gift necessarily. There is going to be benefits of this new diversion that are going to go back to the sponsor by being able to improve their operation and to a certain extent, while Mr. Smith appears to feel he's not particularly getting any benefit, as per his letter, there are the benefits that are going to accrue to the sponsor in terms of water management during the irrigation and non-irrigation season. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
The final contract amount was $63,860.17.
What'd you do, Jody?
Fire alarm.
Test of your emergency.
It's laws. It's our laws. I think we have to follow.
I think we can all proceed to the door.
Everybody's getting
Highest best use. No way. Sell a million acres of ground. Work.
Anadarko, you know, had to know. Because they did.
The kind of problem with this, and that's a couple of reasons here, and it'll affect what I want. So when you, that's mineral so grazing generate probably less than, it's probably less than $25 as far as what it generates.
I could look it up.
But it's not much. And what you're looking at, actual mineral production, is it's oil, I can figure that out in a heartbeat. And what's unproduced work? And the truth is, it's little as this. And even Governor knows it. They're default on their credit lines. Damn right. They owe $30 billion or whatever, and I know some people from down in your. So up with my credit line.
Southland's also on the same.
Yeah. So really, our 30 EMTF is producing now, less than 1%. Yeah. So what we could move into that, make a, here's the catch, Gordon. The day takes it over to the state lease rate.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you from $1.60, 6.11. See it now?
On the grade, but that's not the big local. The minute that it goes to state, it's not. And I've told Gordon, everything, I'm just telling you, you take all that land off.
Well, I talked, here's the deal, grazing, pay that.
Well, some way you gotta pay for it, except on the property taxes back to those counties.
So, come up that, anyway, I've been talking out on these other.
I can hear you guys, but I get. The good thing is we're both dead. That's what it's. The noise is worse than.
So, Larry, when you go to 611, you instantly cover the property taxes. That's one of the things I've talked to the governor about it anyways. These exchanges are across county lines now all the time.
Yeah.
They've got to start putting a provision in them that says, look, it's a hold harmless to the county
Yeah.
that gets the public grounds. They got to have their taxes paid. Otherwise, you create a federal government deal. But going to that 611, that's going to be the big kickback. Initially, those ranchers are all going to rub their hands together and go, holy shit, we just got rid of the pain in the ass.
Well, and so this is nothing new. We dealt with this when we looked at that federal lands transfer, and when they tried to get that when we were working with the other states, the ag community, the ranching community in Arizona said, like hell you're going to transfer that because their state grazing leases were like $12.
No, that's where I'm at, Larry. And
And
so when you move to
it was
$6,
the Arizona Stock Growers Association opposed the transfer to make it because of
and this
the
will be the
ag.
same. So you're gonna have Helliers and a bunch of them guys come in, they're gonna pitch fit, because your grazing leases will be in the hundreds of thousands, Jane.
It'll be interesting though, because the other thing that will happen, and given wherever we're at within the cattle market cycle, although most of those guys down there are Ogden, most of them have minerals.
I get, shit, if your Rock Springs grazing.
No, I know.
It's
and
all
so-
paid for.
So they're like, shit,
I
get
get
the
it.
feds out of our frickin' hair. We'll do, because they slow down their mineral production
Yeah,
on
no,
the
no,
checkerboard.
Well, and here's the other thing. So the state could then move to a large-scale exchange with the feds.
That's the point I was
That's the
saying.
big one, is you go block up 1 million acres of state ground in one block and 1 million acres of BLM.
So right
And you
after you,
exchange the minerals, you do the whole 9 yards.
right after you acquire that, you start exchanging that surface out with
Well,
these
here's what I would
guys.
do for initial, I wouldn't exchange, you know what I'd go to?
Hey, guys.
I'd go to your delegation and say, give it to us, your administration costs are higher, and we're gonna guarantee you certain things, and we'll just take care of it. Just deed it to the state. They've done that before.
Deed is the what?
Just give
Yeah, but that don't count against.
Well, that's what, guys, he still wants his break, so we'll include that break in there. This one was not scheduled, so we'll do your scheduled one. With that, I would call back, I guess, Judy was on the floor when all this happened.
Hanover outfit, this is my district.
And I don't know if she pulled it on or not, but
Yeah.
I was hoping it would get me out of this, but apparently that didn't work, so. And I've been asked, that maybe it was because I was getting a little too animated, so I'll try to hold it down a little bit. Cut it short. All right, Mr. Chairman, so where we left off, for the project description, so the Hanover Irrigation District Board requested a feasibility study in order to understand options for replacing the Hanover flume and the bridge. So underneath the project findings and recommendations, the project costs on this varied quite a bit. And Peter, in his closeout memo, did provide a table on the backside of the closeout memo, and you can see how the costs do vary quite a bit in all the alternatives that they looked at. So the plan does lay out construction and maintenance costs for the next 75 years. They also recommended that the district change their rate assessment to $25.42 an acre. It's currently at $16 an acre to fund construction of that new flume. But because they are working on the Cottonwood Spillway project right now, they decided to hold off on applying for construction funding in 2019, but will potentially look to do that in the future. A public report presentation was held in Worland on July 18th of 2019, and I would entertain the recommendation to be made by the office, and any questions that you all may have, I will attempt to answer.
commissioners have any questions on this subject for Jody?
We accept the report on the Hanover Canal.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we do have that recommendation on the back of the closeout memo, so I believe we need to have it read like that.
Read like it is, okay.
I move the acceptance of the Hanover Irrigation District Flume Replacement Study, Level 2 project report being completed, and further, Wyoming Water Development Commission makes the following findings related to this project.
So with that, we will say that Commissioner Geis made the motion, Sheridan Little, Commissioner Little seconded. And we will now call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you, Jody. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, on the previous closeout document, Katie, I did not read the proposed motion, but if it's all right with my second and everyone else, that would be the formal motion.
Thank you. The rest of you will reflect that official motion.
Thank you.
With that, we will continue to our small water project program amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for the Church's Small Water Project. This is amendment number 1. It is a time-only amendment, and I will let Barry explain what the amendment is.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Select Water. Before you, as our director has indicated, is this Church's Small Water Project Agreement Amendment Number 1. This is a no-cost, 1-year time extension only request, such that the district may complete the project. Right now, currently, the agreement is to expire 12/31 of this year. Our sponsor is the Laramie Rivers Conservation District. We do have an individual here, Martin Curry, a resource specialist with the district, is here. Can answer any questions you might have. This project was approved in the 2017 legislation, and it's a livestock watering system. Basically, to improve the project was to improve an existing well and pumping station, and then install 8,300 foot of pipe to 2 stock tanks. Over the last couple of years, the district has been working with NRCS. They ended up drilling a new well instead, which was paid for by NRCS, not water development funding. That was drilled in May of 2019, and at that time, the well was tested, and it showed an adequate yield of about 6 gallons per minute. After that, notice to proceed was issued for our portion of the project, which include the pipeline, the pump, the troughs, and so forth, and construction was completed only 2 weeks ago. And that's why this is late breaking news. And what happened after they connected the well and so forth, what they're finding now is the yields are not what they were previously, and in the 2 to 2.5 gallons per minute range. And so the thought now is they'd like to re-drill the well, and that would be done without water development funding, and then reconnect. And so to do that, it's going to take more time than the contract will allow, and so we need to extend that. And we do have Martin Curry here with the district if you have any questions.
Does the commission have any questions for the sponsor? Go ahead, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move the amendment.
Is there a second? Moved by Commissioner Purcell, seconded by Commissioner Geis. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you, Barry. Next item of business is our USGS WWDC joint funding agreement for stream.
Mr. Chairman.
You're off one. We're on
Oh, am I?
item number 8.
Small water?
No,
One
groundwater
down.
grant, recommendation and contract.
8.
Oh, this one, okay, yeah. I'm sorry. Groundwater grant recommendation and contract. Under our tab P.
Mr. Chairman, I have Kevin Boyce from our office here to explain this project.
Thank you, Director Gebhardt. Good morning, Commission, Select Water. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest a way to advance through this, to the substance of this tab. And first of all, I would like to provide a brief description of the funding program. To those who aren't real familiar with this, these applications only come up once or twice a year, some years not at all. And then I will proceed with the substance of the funding and the actual project that's proposed. And then I will invite the sponsor and the sponsor's engineer to the podium to discuss anything I miss or any questions you may have of the project. And then you can follow with a commission action on this, a motion. And then there, as Director Gebhardt mentioned previously, there is select water action required on the contract between the commission and the sponsor. So under the tab P, you'll see a recommendation and a contract, okay? I hope. Is that satisfactory, Mr. Chairman?
It is.
Thank you.
With that, we will take a vote on that if we deem that it's valid. So I would ask for a motion.
No, thank you.
Oh, no.
If you would let me proceed.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. The best primer on the groundwater grant program is really, I'm going to read from the statute. And the original statute, which was passed in 1981, and that is under 41-2-119, entitled Groundwater Studies. And I'm not going to read the entire statute, but I'll probably just skip around. I know you don't have it in front of you, but it reads, "The Commission may expend from the funds appropriated under subsection A of this section for exploration and for feasibility studies for use of underground water for municipal and rural domestic purposes, subject to the following conditions." Now, subsection A really states that the grants shall be made from revenues from Water Development Account 1, and those revenues are hereby so appropriated, which means that these funds are already residing in Water Development Account 1, starting in 1981, and since 1981, $8,800,000 have been appropriated in in blocks over the years by the legislature, and I think there's probably been about 6 appropriations. The last appropriation was an appropriation of $2 million by the legislature in the planning bill in 2019. So at this point in time, within the groundwater grant program, we have unobligated funds of $314,146.81 to expend on these project applications. Okay, the conditions of dispersing these funds shall be for the exploration or study that shall be conducted in conjunction with an incorporated city or town, water and sewer district, or service and improvement district in Wyoming under an agreement. An agreement is the contract you'll see. Not more than $400,000 in state funds shall be expended for any one exploration or study under this subsection. And lastly, the incorporated city or town, water and sewer district, or service improvement district shall provide at least 25% of the cost of the exploration or study from funds other than this subsection. So what this is a 75%, 25% cash match with the sponsor, and it's payment upon invoice progressing through the study. Quickly, use of funds. Now we're talking about underground water. This is groundwater exploration. Funds may be utilized for the following: geologic feasibility studies, well siting and well design, permitting, geophysical surveys, including downhole geophysical surveys, exploration borehole drilling programs, production size test well and replacement well drilling programs, aquifer testing and analysis, water quality analysis, well enhancement, in other words, pressure fracking or acid fracking, packer tests, plugging and abandonment of project boreholes, employing non-conventional drilling, completion, and testing techniques, and lastly, but there may be some others that could be added to this, aquifer storage and retrieval feasibility and development projects. The funds shall not be utilized to acquire temporary or permanent rights-of-way. They shall not be utilized for environmental assessments or other NEPA required evaluations. We don't rehab existing wells. We don't rehab or develop spring sources. We don't re-enter or complete oil and gas test wells for water supply. And if we're drilling any test boreholes or production size wells under this program, the program ends with the drilling and casing completion and testing. So we leave a capped well at the site for the sponsor to advance with if it meets the minimum quality requirements of their project. So the sponsor would advance with a level 3 or move however to make beneficial use from that source supply. Okay, so that's a description of the program. Any questions on the program? Okay.
Comments, Larry?
Mr. Chairman, I
Senator?
have a question. Kevin, you explained it's on the first page under project description, we're looking at a 67% grant, but then when we get over on the,
D is 75% grant,
but now I see
Mr.
on
Chairman.
the second page is 75% grant. Did that change at some point, or what's the difference between?
Okay, now, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, you're pointing to which page?
On
Commissioner
the
Ian.
first page, under project description, and where it says describe existing status, then down under 2018 level 3 construction, it says 67% grant.
Oh, okay.
And then on the
Well-
fourth page, and I know you're referring to 75% grant.
Okay, I'll address that. Okay, the sponsor is the Melody Ranch Improvement Service District in Teton County. Melody Ranch is a large residential district, subdivision, They also have a homeowners association, and they're 2 miles south of Jackson on US Highway 89, 191. And the flats, the South Park flats there of the Snake River bottoms. Melody Ranch has a 25-year-old public water system. The system consists of 2 supply wells, a buried 300,000-gallon concrete storage tank, and approximately 5.8 miles of distribution pipeline pressured by an on-demand booster pump station. So they have a storage tank, but they do not feed by gravity. They have pumps that pressure the system. Okay, so getting back to Commissioner Yankee's question about the discrepancy there, I'm pretty much described this as a 2 steps forward, 1 steps back project here. If you will see under item 1 of the project description, which Commissioner Yankee is pointing at, there was a master plan that was completed in 2017, and the result, with the recommendations of that level 1 master plan, the sponsor made an application for level 3 construction funding. Okay, so, and that's the 67% grant of that's the level 3 funds that they requested and were was in the 2018 construction bill. So they have those level 3 funds. However, what the sponsor is wishing to do and is really step back from the level 3 and perform what we would do in a level 2 study. Okay, so we would take the findings of a level 1. We would normally, in a level 2 study, take the findings of the level 1 and look at certain components and refine some of the findings of the level 1. And that is what the sponsor has done since they acquired their level 3 funding. So they're kind of stepping back and they want to take another look at the level 1 study and those recommendations. And what they did was commission their own, what we call a homebrew study, and they wanted to go back at the findings of the level 1 and look at the siting of a well that was recommended in the level 1 and relocate that recommended well site, okay, to another location which would reduce some transmission line and which would also penetrate to a deeper member of the Snake River alluvium. So they did that study and submitted that to us for our consideration. And we agreed with their findings. We agreed with citing a well at another location, citing a well that would be deeper than the well that was recommended in the level 1 study. The level 1, most of the wells around there are fairly shallow wells that are penetrated into the upper portions of the Snake River alluvium. They're good production wells. There's quite a few of them. They're only the sponsor's existing wells. The MR1 well is 163 foot in depth. Their MR2 well is 99 foot in depth. And also under the study they did, they tested a deeper well that's in the neighborhood of the district. The Melody Ranch was indeed a ranch before it was a subdivision, and at the headquarters of the original ranch, a deep well was drilled, a 500-foot well was drilled, And it was a fully penetrating well. It drilled the full depth of the Snake River alluvium, which is the Jackson holes in an elongate trough filled with centuries and centuries and over the millennia has filled with glacial and alluvial deposits and is quite the extensive aquifer. And there are several it's fairly complex. It's not a bucket of sand. And we have discovered even to the north in Rafter J how complex it really is. But in this particular well, this deep well, they discovered a fairly thick, coarse sand which produces good quality and good quantity. So the sponsor's recommendation in their level 2 study, we'll call it, was that they move this well to another location. It would shorten the transmission line alignment and provide as good or better quantity and quality of water as their existing wells. They're also asking to pump test their existing wells to determine if larger pumps may be placed in those 2 wells as well. So there would be pump testing of their existing wells and a new well to be drilled, a new public water supply well to be drilled. So with that, the project cost estimate provided by their level 2 study was 245. Okay, let me back up. What they want to do to drill this deep well is drill some test wells to determine where, if this thick sand, this thick, deep sand is present in another location other than the good well, because in these alluvial deposits, it can be quite variable in a horizontal sense. You might have a thick sand here, but you might step over 1,000 feet and lose your thick sand. So really the substance of this groundwater exploration grant is a request for 2 test wells to be drilled to test the presence and extent of this deeper sand that I just explained. I guess with that, if there are any questions, we can bring Bob Hammond and Matt Ostick up to the. Bob Hammond's the chairman of the Improvement Service District. Matt's their engineer with Rendezvous Engineering. So, if Mr. Chairman, if you would like to begin with some questions, or
I do have myself. I just had on your item 4, your water rates, water user fee of $1 per 1,000 gallon. That number looks awful light compared to, I think, our other peers within the state of Wyoming. That's about as reasonable as I've ever heard a water rate. And I guess that would be my first question. Your second one is, of course, your tap fees. I think you have an annual assessment. Is that annual assessment $300 a year or $350 a year per tap? So they pay that fee every year plus the water at $1.50 per thousand?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bob Hammond, President of the Melody Ranch ISD. I believe our water rates, I think you initially said $1, but I think it is $1.50 per M gallon, which actually is the same rate as the town of Jackson. We tried to keep it at the user rate fairly equal to that. The other question you had was the $350 per year. That is applied not only to the water system, but we also have a partial sewer system and the roadways. So that covers all 3 of those. Approximately 40% is what we apply to maintaining the water system.
40% of the 350.
Correct.
So that's how you break it out. You got three entities here or three items that break out the 350.
That's a good approximation, Mr. Chairman, yes.
So they're actually like a homeowner's fee or something, you'd call it, or something similar, annual fee. That's a question I had. It just seems like I've never seen $1.50 water before per thousand, and I know you got a lot of water, and maybe that's what concurs to the cost. So with that, I have no other question. Any other questions for these gentlemen by the commission? Yes, Commissioner Glick?
I guess, so this 900, what is it? Hold on here. You guys already have, or holding on to the 944,000 for your project? Okay, now this other part is in addition to, and that's just to explore the wells. This 944, is that gonna cover everything after we give you a time extension? Is there construction costs gonna increase significantly? May they increase significantly?
Mr. Chairman, Matt Ostick with Rendezvous Engineering. Our goal on this whole approach is to save money in the construction funding. So our goal is to reduce transmission line length and come up with a better, actually a more reliable source, less subject to surface pollution and better water quality, and actually come in under the original construction estimate. But until we actually locate that well, we don't know exactly what that cost savings will be. But that's the whole drive of this work, is to save the construction cost. Okay.
I guess my other question would be, have you changed your water rates recently with this application, or has it been that way traditionally?
Chairman, I believe we increased our water rates here just a couple of years ago. I think it was $1.30 per M gallon. So we bumped it up a couple of years ago.
Thank you. Any other questions by the commission? Senator Hicks?
Mr. Chairman, kind of a couple of questions. One would be go back to the level 1 master plan, not having read that, but did that look at additional sources of supply within that master plan? And did it identify these other potential groundwater sources? That would be the first question. And then if we move forward with this, and to pick up on Commissioner Glick's comments on the existing appropriation for the construction, if in fact that there is potential cost savings to do that, do we have any idea what that would reduce that current level appropriation for the current construction project is?
Mr. Chairman, I'll answer the first question, and I believe I'll have Mr. Ostick answer the second question. And the answer to the first question is, in the level 1 master plan, yes, we had a cursory well siting task item in the master plan. And the consultant that was working on that chose the shallow aquifer option. Okay, so there's, like I said, there's quite a few wells, shallow wells, 163 to less than 100 feet, which are good producers. So they chose a location that was as far away from some of the other high production wells in the area, and picked that location. And that location, if you can see that in the map that is in the recommendation on page, 4th page of the, if you look at the map and you go up the right side, if you go up the west if you travel west on that map, of the right side, there's at the upper left-hand corner, there's a little circle that has a W in it. That was the well site that was picked in the level 1 study. And we were fairly certain that that would be a good location for that well. However, the transmission line, which brings water back east to the pump station and storage tank was, Matt, what was the length on that, 2,700 feet? Something like that, yeah. So it was a lengthy pipeline that is also a rather tight easement, and there's a lot of trees in there. There's also a creek crossing. You cross Flat Creek there. So there was, not only was it a fairly lengthy transmission line, but there was some difficulty in that alignment. So that was the one that was picked in the level 1. Melody Ranch and their engineer felt like they had a as good and better chance of moving that well site back to the little white W's in the middle of that map on the left-hand side to make for a shorter transmission line. Now, also on that map, I've created some little gold stars there. And those gold stars mark the location where we would be drilling these two test wells. So the one to the west there would be the second location that would be drilled. The one to the furthest east is a location that's right next to their tank and pump station. So if we did find that deep sand there, then that would eliminate a whole lot of transmission line. So, but that's kind of a crapshoot because we don't know if that sand is present. Matt? And address the chairman, please.
Mr. Chairman, as far as the cost savings, I don't have the exact numbers on my head because we've seen a lot of increase in construction prices in the last few years in Jackson. So we're a little nervous about the original level 1 cost estimates. And so that's another reason we took a look at this approach. We don't feel that the level 1 costs reflected going through all these treat areas that would be very expensive to reclaim or to replace to equal conditions. But we're talking several $100,000 of transmission line savings if we can get the location near the existing booster pump and pump station, and we don't upgrade and hit a very good well and don't end up increasing the capacity of the existing wells. There would be significant cost savings in order, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 off the top of my head, but we don't know the exact numbers until the project's designed and we get it out for bids. And we're holding off on the final design on the main project until we do this investigative work. That's going to determine the direction we go in the final design.
Yes, Commissioner.
So Matt, Chairman, pipe that's in the ground, is it poly or is it cast?
It's PVC plastic.
Any other questions for these gentlemen pertaining to their water project? I just had, so in other words, your tank is not a gravity system. You have a pumping pressure system on the tank for your distribution, correct? Yes. And none of this is going towards any upgrade or anything with that, correct? Just the wells?
There's no change with the tank. The overall project does include updating the booster pumps.
Booster pumps?
Yes.
Does that require, or does that allow you fire flows for your area?
Yes, they accommodate fire flows as well as the normal domestic demands.
Thank you. Any other questions by the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
this is more of a question for Kevin, but assuming that in this groundwater exploration grant program, we find a well that is suitable for the district's needs. That will be a state-owned well at the end of the project, and they will have to buy that from us in level 3, correct?
Well, actually, that's a very good question, and I probably should have covered that in talking about the program. The groundwater grant operates a lot like a level 3, so the sponsor makes an application, and it's a sponsor-guided project. So we provide 75% of the costs, they provide 25%, and at the end of the project, the well is actually a well that's a cased hole that's owned by the sponsor. However, in this case, we're not going to be drilling any production-sized wells. These are strictly stratigraphic test holes. They will be drilled, temporarily cased, and abandoned. So the well that would be, if this program's successful, the well that would be drilled would be the level 3 well, which is within the level 3 funding, and of course that would be the sponsor's well. But yeah, good question.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, a question on that, because every time you move that rig on and off that location, you escalate costs. And I understand, drilling the small 2-inch or whatever the diameter for the exploratory well, but if the well actually proves out, wouldn't it be beneficial at that point in time just to go ahead and drill a production well versus abandon that, moving the rig off, and then bringing another one back on to drill the production well?
Sure, I agree. However, I'm not sure how, if that would be something that can be scheduled by the engineer in this. I think, unfortunately, the chicken and the egg here is that we're going to drill these test wells. We'll find out the best location, and then the engineer is going to go into design phase for the rest of the project, and part of that design phase is the design of the level 3 well. And unfortunately, yes, that would be a remob at a later date for the level 3 well.
Mr. Chairman, is it anticipated, and this would be a question for the engineer, would the location of the production well, because this is exploratory stuff, is it anticipated that the production well is going to be in the exact same location as the exploratory well? Or is it anticipated that that may move once we know more about the stratigraphy and the water-bearing formations there?
We're anticipating the new well will be where we're successful drilling this exploratory well. Just right now it's an unknown. If the exploratory well, the first one works out well, we won't need the budget we're asking for now. But with competitive bid requirements and just the process of the funding and permitting, I agree, mobilization, it'd be nice to be able just to go into our production drilling at that time, but because of the funding requirements and advertising for bids, we're most likely going to have to do the production well as part of the level 3 funding. Our goal is to be drilling this well as soon as this contract is signed, the exploratory well, and then we're going to be in the middle of winter and probably shutting the project down anyway, and going for spring or summer construction on the final well, just for weather conditions and seasonal conditions as well. So.
What if you find that first exploratory well is great? You going to go ahead and do the second one, or are you going to go ahead and go for your production well?
Mr. Chairman, there'd be no reason to go for the second one. If the first one's great, we're going to be happy and not spend near as much budget as we're asking for. So, and homeowners would prefer that we don't spend as much money as we're asking for. So.
Sorry, it's kind of an obvious question, but
yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, follow-up. I'm assuming the first well will be right next to town, right next to the tank is going to be the first well?
Yes.
That was also an obvious question, but I wanted to hear the answer.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? And just to follow up, so as I understand the characterization, it's our own rules and regulations that are the impediment to being able to go ahead and drill the production well. It's not an engineering. Once a well's there, you can design around it. It's a known, it's available. In fact, in some cases, it actually makes the engineering and design better because you have all the information at hand. So what within the rules and regulations are prohibiting us to go ahead and go right straight from a groundwater exploration grant with the existing well driller to go to production? I guess that's the question. If this is the impediment, it's a self-imposed impediment based on our regulations and rules. I guess I'd just like to know what that is. Maybe we can fix that.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's an impediment created by the Water Development Commission advancing with this project and with knowledge that there's a level 3 project, but if we do find a great well location, then we begin with the permitting process with the State Engineer's Office rules and regulations and with the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, Water Quality Division rules and regulations to acquire a permit for a permit to construct a public water supply well, which they have up to 60 days to consider. So there's a wealth of rules and regulations that impede this, but I certainly understand why the question's asked.
Mr. Chairman, is it fair to say that you're hesitant to go to a production well, given the characteristics of the aquifer right now? That you're reticent to go right to production without the exploration because you're not real sure what is going to be at that site? Is that the reason that we're taking this in stages? Or because in answer to Senator Hicks' question, there's lots of times where groundwater grant goes right to production wells. So that is not an impediment of the program. But what I'm hearing is there is some concern about the aquifer characteristics and wanting to understand that before you invest in the production well. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there was a question in there, and the answer is that this was presented in the application to us as strictly a stratigraphic borehole exploration program, and not to be followed up with a production size well program, because that was already in the level 3. That could have been a way to structure this.
Any other questions?
However.
By the commission or the select board?
I'd call for the question.
I don't think we have a motion, do we?
That's what I'm asking for with the question.
Is there a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second it.
By Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And would the Select Water Commission like the floor at this time, or do you want to go through both amendments and then have the floor? What's your preference? I think you have 2 to vote on, correct?
Just take each one separately if we would,
Okay,
Mr.
then
Chairman.
you have the floor.
Josh, you want to go through those and then call for the roll? Or do we need a roll call vote on that?
If you need a roll call vote, so if you want to take a motion and second and voice vote, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there a motion for the Select Water Committee?
I'd move it.
It's been moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. On the second project, can I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I think we still have to present that second.
Yeah, we have to, we'll do a presentation on that, Larry, and come back and allow you to vote on it. So we have item 9, USGS, it's a WWDC joint funding agreement for stream stats, phases 2 and 4. In your queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will let Jody Pring present this contract.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to make sure that the fire alarm doesn't go off again.
I promise.
So, under, I don't have the tab Q.
In the white queue.
In the white book, you'll find a, what we call a joint funding agreement between the Water Development Commission and U.S. Geological Survey. So this joint funding agreement covers an appropriation that was granted last session to cover phases 3 and 4 of our stream stats project that we're working on for the state of Wyoming, and we talked about that a little bit yesterday. So the USGS portion is almost $421,000, and the Wyoming Water Development Commission's portion is almost $631,000. So with that, I would entertain any questions from the commission or from Select Water on this agreement.
Any questions for Jody on this item
I did.
by the commission or by the Select Water Committee?
I would move the project.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Geis, seconded by Commissioner Yankee to approve this project. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. And again, Larry, we'll turn it over to you on your Select Water.
All those in favor of the motion to enter into the agreement with the United States Geological Survey. But first, I need a motion.
I move.
It's been moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you, Jody, that was easy.
Thank you.
Getting easier, right? All right, we'll move on to the next item of business, the next item 10. Or, let's do a break. We promised one over here, so we better make our word right. So, Commissioner Geis, we'll start back here in about 15 minutes. All right? Thank you.
just always work.
Instead of reading ahead. Bad habit about it.
My bad, 2020.
Like, where are they? We're gonna do what?
Welcome back. What we're going to do is on item 10, 2020 funding recommendations. What we'll do is we'll go through the items, we'll make a vote, or not a vote, but a motion, do a second, and then we'll allow everybody to come back through if there's any additional questions. But in the meantime, every sponsor will have the opportunity to come up and, if they're here, if there's questions that the commission needs to ask, we need answers. So with that, we will start. I'll turn it, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, what you're saying is we start with a motion and a second on, like, let's say, level 3, or count 1 level 3 projects. We get a second?
We will go through, we'll go through and allow the sponsors to come up first. Then we'll do our motion and our second. And then if there's an additional, we'll go through each item and allow for additional questions at the time before the vote cast.
So then the motion at the end would be to approve all. Then we have discussion on that amendment.
That's right.
And, okay. All right.
Yep. Okay. So with that, we will allow the funding recommendations. We'll turn it back to our boss and let him proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we put our track shoes on and go through this, I'll just invite any sponsors that would like to come up. When they hear their project called, please come up. And I would also, at this time, just let you know that I will be declaring a conflict of interest because of my previous employment on a few of the jobs today. And in those circumstances, I'll remove myself to the audience, and Jason Mead will be presenting those projects. First project under tab A, all of these will be in the Brown Book, is the Bighorn Regional Transmission 2020 Level 3 project. The proposed budget of the 67% grant totaling $4,361,700 and a total project of $6,510,000. This project is an extension of the Bighorn Regional Transmission system to the town of Burlington. They have 2 wells currently that feed the town of Burlington that are questionable both in quality and in quantity. And I will open it up for any questions.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and members of the commission, thank you very much for your time today considering our project. The regional project was started back under Mr. Purcell's direction, and due to the foresight of the staff and himself, we've have supply and capacity in our pipelines to be able to serve the Burlington area, and when they requested it last year, we are pleased to be able to entertain their request. And this project will be a pretty straightforward transmission line to the town of Burlington, an extension of our existing system. And there are people along the way that are not contemplating being served for this project, but if they form a district, they can certainly come in and apply to us or for water supply for themselves. So the rural area is not included in this project, but in the future, we will have capacity for them also.
Any Questions for the sponsor, John?
Chairman, we've got the Mayor of Burlington's here today, Gerald George, and their Public Works Director, Lee Allen, is here, and we also have our engineer here. So if there are any types of questions you have, we'd be happy to answer them.
By the commission? And
This is about the final one we'll have for this south region, if we get Burlington put in there.
In the north and west area that Bighorn Regional could cover, this would be the extent of what we could cover. There may be some areas in the southern end down towards Thermopolis.
Yeah, I understand
But-
that. But this will take in Otto and Burlington, and everybody will be happy.
Correct.
And John, you did mention that your line sizing was great enough for any entity that you may pass or could link to the element, right?
Chairman, the engineers and the water development staff over the years have been kind enough to design a system that takes into account all the people in that area and their demand. So we do have sufficient size. We don't have to relay any pipe for this project.
Thank you. Any other questions by the commission for John? Or the sponsors? What about the, no questions down there? None down there?
Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with your project.
The next project under tab B in the Brown Book, the Cheyenne Transmission Pump Station and Tank 2020. This is a project that I'm declaring a conflict, and I will step back.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners and Select Water members. My name's Brad Brooks. I'm the, do you want to go before me? Do you need to do anything?
I won't do anything if you want to just handle it.
My name's Brad Brooks. I'm the Director for the City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. I have Frank Strong as our Operation and Maintenance Manager over our distribution system. He's the one that's going to kind of give a little brief explanation and reasoning for why we have this project before you. Again, I just always want to take the opportunity anytime I am able to meet before you to just tell you thank you again for what you do, for the years of working with Cheyenne. We've done a lot of projects. We wouldn't be where we are at today if it wasn't for the funding that you've helped us with over the years. So we thank you for your consideration of this project this morning, and I'm going to turn it over to Frank. Jason, would you like to add?
So, Mr. Chairman, just a brief explanation. This project is a construction of a new 3 million gallon elevated tank, and it replaces a couple of other existing storage tanks and a pump station. And by doing this, it improves efficiency and delivery to the north side of town, which then frees up resources for delivery elsewhere. So the entire project cost is $12,360,000. The City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities is asking for a 67% grant on that, and then they're going to seek some matching funds from SRF. So, there you go.
Thank you. The Board of Public Utilities in their master plan had 2 large projects that were scheduled for the north side of town. We needed to replace the round top tank. Currently, we're under a decree by EPA that it has to be taken out of service because of the condition. That tank was built in 1914. We got over 100 years worth of use out of it, so we definitely got our money's worth. And then we had to replace the existing Buffalo Ridge pump station, the same capacity, and provide redundancy. And we were thinking that was going to be around $13 million. Staff got together and said, is this the best use of our funds long-term for the needs of the City of Cheyenne? So we conducted a study to look at what we can do to meet current demand and future demand in that area, because we have a lot of growth happening on the north side of town. We looked at several alternatives and determined that the construction of a new elevated tank would allow us to go from only be able to serve another 490 homes on the north side of Cheyenne to 4,900 homes. So that's a factor of 10. We were also able to eliminate a booster station, improve efficiencies in our system, and simplify our operations. So we really feel this is the best long-term solution for the City of Cheyenne.
Question by Commissioner Lancaster.
Chairman, I see that your rates are at $31, and that's an average. Am I looking at that correctly? Second page, fourth page, sorry. That's a pretty good price on water.
I do believe that is correct. That is our average residential bill.
Efficient.
Mr. Chairman, this is one of the places in my life that my water bill is higher, so I am above average. I'd like the record to reflect on this one component of life.
And Mr. Chair, we appreciate him being above average.
I did have a question. Where did I go? Does this area, is it part of the city of Cheyenne, or is it outbound? Is it annexed to the city?
Yes, the area that's served on the north side of town is part of the city of Cheyenne.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner.
Just a question on the financing between WWDC and SRF. And I can't remember what the balance is or if there's a limit or a maximum on the SRF, but why was it not determined to go for a higher level or a 50% SRF and a 50% water development? Just if you can explain that, because I'm not real familiar with the SRF program, but I know there's quite a few federal dollars that come in through that program.
Yes, I can answer. I mean, I think it's pretty simple. I think the board has always looked at the fact of getting as much grant money, of course, as we can. The SLIB loan, I think everybody's aware of those. Those are usually 20 years, 2.5%. And I think it was just basically a board decision based on where we're at with other projects and things we have going that we felt like the grant through the Water Development Commission was best for us right now, just operationally, so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
Yes, Senator Anselmi?
Mr. Chairman, on page 4, I'm just confused, and if you could just explain to me, I know this was maybe the same direction the commissioner had asked, but at the top it says the average monthly water bill is 31.68 or 32.63 post-project. Then on line 9 on page 4, it says a theoretical monthly water bill should be $123.89. Does that mean that we're just charging too low? Is that, I don't understand the differences between the two.
Mr. Chairman, that's based on, the pre and post water rates are based on the rates that are provided, I believe, on the previous page. Should be on page 3.
Mr. Chairman, my question isn't about the pre and post. I'm not worried about the difference there. I understand that. I'm saying between line 9 and the rates above, $31 versus $123.
Okay, so under paragraph B, line number 9, that's a theoretical. That comes out of the American Water Works. That's a theoretical average monthly water bill, and it's based on the average household median income. And so that number comes from, again, the average household median income, and it's at 2.5% and then divided by 12. So the theoretical for this particular location is $123 per month.
Chairman follow-up? Thank you. My question would be then, basically, what it's saying to us is that, I mean, is this a standard we should have as a commission, that we should have it sort of be that the same rates? I mean, we talked about it earlier where it's $1 in Jackson, Wyoming, and they're paying, say, $30 and here. And then up in Riverton, in one of these, as I went through the tabs earlier, they're paying $60 as an average. I mean, it just sort of seems unfair, and I'm just wondering, should they be hitting this average? Why do we even have that as a selection criteria or operating criteria if we're not even trying to hit it? I'm just curious. I'm confused.
I could share just based on your number before it's you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, our rate right now currently is $4.90 per thousand. So that's what our current rate is for.
How does that compare with other peers like Laramie, Casper, or do you know?
I mean, we've done some studies. I think we're fairly comparable in our area. Again, I think everybody just needs to remember and understand every system is somewhat different. I think everybody's aware of Cheyenne's system. It's not a very simple system. We have a lot of infrastructure. And so when you go to do rates or your rate study, a lot of that is based on the infrastructure you have. It's different than maybe what people would pay here in Casper. They have a major river running through their town. In Cheyenne, we have the mighty Crow Creek. So there's a big difference in what it takes to get water to town. And when you're doing that and you're figuring your rates, that all figures into that pricing. So.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Look at Gillette. It has to go 4,000 feet to the Madison, with those tremendous costs. So, yeah, I know that it does change over the state, and it should. It depends on the availability of the water source is the main ingredient to the cost. So, yeah, but 31 is still, it's probably a good average, Bill. It's better than 150, I think.
Mr. Chair, we do offer, we have a tiered rate structure, so that's part of our conservation program. So up to the first 6,000 gallons, then I think it goes to 12, 16, and then anything above that, they're all tiered rates. So, of course, people can use more water if they want, but if they use it, they're gonna pay for that water, so.
And I think these are larger lots, correct? They're not downtown lots. These are on acres or somewhat larger lots, correct?
I think our average is based, this monthly is based like on 6,000 gallons of water, so. But yeah, if it's a larger lot, depending on what they have for irrigation needs, uses, they typically will use more.
Okay, is there any questions or additional questions by the commission? Yes, Representative
Thank you, Mr.
Blake.
Chairman. On page 5, on the number 12 bullet point, it just says it will free up resources for deliveries elsewhere. Are you looking at expanding the north side of town there, or just curious what that indicates?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you. Yeah, we are trying to meet the development that is appearing on the north side of town. We have one development that's going right now is the Whitney Ranch development, which will have 2,000 homes in it. And as I mentioned earlier, our current system can only handle another 490 homes.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman? Is that all in the city limits, or is that in the county, or?
I can't recall for sure if all of Whitney's been annexed, but it will all be annexed into the city of Cheyenne.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions by the commission on this project? Anybody in the Select Water Commission?
We just have one quick follow-up question here. We're curious on your answer on that number 9 on page 4, and you said it was based on some theoretical water bill. Is that a local or a national average?
Mr. Chairman, that'd be a national.
Why are we using national for the state of Wyoming?
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, the American Water Works Association is a recognized association that deals with water issues as far as everything from rates to piping. It's a national recognized association that deals a broad spectrum of water issues. And so we historically, we've used this over the years to get an idea of just what a typical or water rate should be, monthly water rate should be based on the average household income.
Does that answer your question?
Well, it does, but it doesn't.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman? Follow up to that, then, I think embedded in that question, in theory, and this is a theoretical rate, in theory, should we be charging more?
Again, I think when you look at the average median household income, it's specific to an area. So this particular, we would have used the city of Cheyenne average household income. which is different than City of Gillette's, for example. And so, although the formula that they use is kind of standardized, but the average household income is based on a certain locality.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for the sponsors? With that, we will allow you to leave the table, and thank you for your time, and good luck with your project.
All right, next project, under tab C, is the cloud seeding in the Medicine Bow, Sierra Madre, and Laramie Ranges. This is the project that we discussed yesterday. The recommendation, as we discussed yesterday for this project, this is the ground-based, or excuse me, the air-based cloud seeding project. And the recommended budget for this project is $705,000. I think we discussed it in detail yesterday, but we can try to answer any questions that may come up.
Any questions or concerns by the commission? I think we did handle this pretty good yesterday. We still don't quite like the formula, if you can work on that next year, but it's too late this one. Maybe it can change some, because I don't think, and I think some of us feel that we're not getting enough participation probably out of the other entities that are involved in this. So with that said, we're good for this year as far as I'm concerned. But it's something that could be looked at, that's what I'm thinking.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, and I think you're talking about the next project that's up, and that is the ground base project in the Wind River Range for cloud seeding. And the recommended budget for this one, this is under tab D, I apologize. Yeah, so this is the cloud seeding in the Wind River Range is where we've got the partners in the upper basin
okay.
and lower basin.
How's the project ahead?
That's correct. And we discussed this, and again, the proposed budget recommendation is $200,000.
Any questions on this particular project?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator.
Just an information request for January. One thing that's not in the write-up that I think that, and this would apply to the last project. Mr. Chairman, it's an information request from the office that's not in the write-ups that I think would be helpful, especially when we get to the bill, is just to have an idea of what the actual projected cost is on a per acre foot. My recollection is based on some of the information, at least on the Sierra Madre Laramie range, it's about $25 an acre foot is what we estimate those costs. I'm just curious, because that's an airborne operation. What's the estimated cost per acre foot? And then for the Green River Basin, if we could also get the cost of what the Water Development Commission currently pays per acre foot of storage in Fontenelle as a comparative cost, I think would be good information.
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, we will try to get that information to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? So is there any other questions on our cloud seeding? If not, we will move on.
Mr. Chairman, next project under tab E is the Gillette Regional Extensions, Phase 5. Total project cost, $4,610,000. They are requesting a 67% grant in the amount of $88,700. That was a mouthful, sorry. This is the fifth project of the regional extensions, and it is to supply water to the Means Water and Sewer District and the Gillette Campbell County Airport. And we've got the sponsors here. If we've got any questions, you have to ask.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name's Mike Cole. I'm the Utilities Director for the City of Gillette. With me is Levi Jensen. He's our project manager for the Utilities Department. Carol Seeger is also here. Carol is our Campbell County administrator, and this project, of course, with serving a fairly large rural water district being represented by the county. Additionally, the Campbell County Airport also managed by the county. I think this is a fairly straightforward regional extensions project. I'm hopeful this is one of the last regional extension projects that we apply for through the commission. We do have a handful of smaller, trailer parks and that type of thing that we'll work through, but this is, I think, probably one of the last ones for the foreseeable future for regional extensions for the Gillette area. The project itself is extension of water pipelines to serve the Means Improvement District. Means consists of about 220 lots. There's about 185 water taps that are active right now within the subdivision. The subdivision is primarily heavy commercial with some residential, and it is fairly close to the airport. The airport, of course, provides, air service, both general aviation and commercial for Gillette. Both Means and the airport are served by individual wells into the Fort Union Formation. They have their own water storage tanks and their own distribution system. Like most of the regional projects in the Gillette area, the Fort Union water supply is dwindling, and we are starting to see some EPA enforcement in some districts as a result of high fluoride levels and radionuclide concentration increasing. To my knowledge, neither of these two districts, the airport and the Means district, have any EPA enforcement, but generally within the Fort Union, we are seeing those trends increasing over time.
I do have a question, Mike. The sponsor, it looks like, is in the support of the county commission, so they're not an entity in this project, correct?
Explain a little bit. The City of Gillette is the sponsor. We executed a joint powers agreement approximately 10 years ago for ease of operations and maintenance, and since the city operates and maintains all the water facilities for the city, we made the decision that the city would own and operate these regional water extensions. So as a result, the city is a sponsor with support from the Campbell County Commissioners. We have also executed water service agreements with the Campbell County Commissioners for the airport, as well as the Means District. Their board has approved a water service agreement once this project is completed.
Yes, Commissioner Geis.
How far is the airport out there? About 10 miles?
I think it's at probably 6 miles, I believe.
5.3 miles.
5.3.
So you got about another 5 mile of pipeline?
That's correct. Yep. And Means is on the way to the airport. The airport would be the terminus. More than likely, we'd start out as a 12 and wrap it down to an 8 and a 6, just as we move forward.
Is there a design for a loop system on this particular
There's
project?
not. All of the planning documents that were done about 10 years ago do not propose a loop for this area. We are starting to see some active light industrial development along our northern loop called Northern Drive. We're hopeful that as those properties develop, we will have development pay its own way and tie into this pipeline, and eventually through development connect a loop as the city expands and grows.
Thank you. With that, will you utilize any of the existing facilities that are there now?
We will. Right now, both districts have their, like I said, their own well, their own pump station, and their own tank. We intend to utilize as much of that existing facility as possible. They also have their own distribution system. This project is mainly just a transmission line to connect to their well and tank site. The district will still have the opportunity to commingle their water with water that is served through the regional water system. And of course, they would provide water service to their customers through their existing system of pipes.
So there is a possibility that this line in some entity would not be used at all if they decide or select to use their own utility.
There could be that potential, but again, as the groundwater dwindles, I think that possibility is unlikely. Also, they are, as part of the water service agreements that were executed, on the hook for, payments of that standby service if they choose to go that route.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Bill.
Mr. Chairman, this serves the mean subdivision, is that what you said?
That's correct.
And how far is that outside the city limits of Gillette?
Probably a couple miles.
A couple miles?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any plans or are there any contracts where there would be like an annexation agreement? I mean, you're providing services outside your city limits.
Yeah, let me explain a little bit. For many years, we have executed annexation agreements for properties outside the city that wanted to receive city water service or city sewer service. We typically only execute those agreements for properties that are immediately contiguous to the city. And also, those agreements are primarily executed with individual property owners and not necessarily a district, because a district doesn't necessarily own land. The individual property owner owns the land. For how we set this up, Gillette has over 40 water districts in the immediate vicinity of Gillette. Each of them have their own well, have their own tank, have their own distribution system. As we crafted a joint powers agreement with the county, the city dropped that provision of requiring a pre-annexation agreement in exchange for regional water service. And that regional water service is providing it at a peak day demand, at a lesser demand than what we would provide a typical customer. The thought being that these districts have already invested money, and I'm sure the commission and the state has invested money into wells and pump stations and tanks. So we are only providing that water supply at a peak day rate. They in turn have to, fill a tank or do other things, boost pressure, increase supply to serve their customers at a peak hour rate, if that helps.
Mr. Chairman, it does. I just, being from Rock Springs and in similar situations with growth in the county, is just watching out for future growth areas of the city, and you don't lock yourself into an area, a desire to grow, but you've locked yourself in, and the pre-annexation agreements can be a good thing, and obviously you've looked at that.
Mr. Chairman, a little history on that. Every regional system, we always encourage regional systems when there's a potential for serving several customers. And I remember the discussion about pre-annexation agreements. They can be a detriment for people wanting to participate in this particular project. And then if they don't participate, our whole purpose of this project was to get a regional system in place. So there was discussion about, we talked about the pros and cons and came up with the policy that they now have regarding that we didn't want an annexation agreement to be a detriment to them being served by the regional system, because then they would be coming to us, if you were Means, for 2 new wells and a new tank and a pipeline. So the whole purpose of this is one project serves an area better than 30 small ones. And so there was a lot of discussion about annexation agreements and what there was that fine line about using them.
You and I have probably forgotten more than what was happened over the years of all these adaptations that come in my term down there on the Ag Committee.
Yep.
All right, is there any other questions
I have a
for our
question,
sponsor?
Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Flick.
I see you're requesting level 3 funding and design and construction to supply water to the Means and the Gillette Campbell County Airport. What's the sewer district? Is that one of you guys, is that a?
There is no sewer district. I believe they're all on individual septics.
It says in your request, it says sewer district on there, though.
I think they were formed as a water and sewer improvement district. To my knowledge, I don't think they have a centralized treatment system. I think they are individual septics. I know that they utilize their taxing authority as a district for maintenance of roads. So they're using 2 out of their 3 mechanisms for water and roads. And I don't believe there's any assessment for centralized wastewater.
Any other questions for our sponsors?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hicks?
no specific questions on this project. We're just sitting here running calculations on each one of these projects, and I guess would be, again, an information request that we include moving forward would be when we do these projects, we calculate the cost per tap and just provide that information for the committee and our edification. I mean, this one's $15,600 per tap with the per individual tap based on the data. And just for all the projects going forward, would like to have that information if we can just put that in there.
We've asked for that before.
One other question then that brings to light is there's no tap fee when you go into let's look at the Means subdivision. So when you put your valve to their connection, okay, they don't pay a tap fee at that point in time. Is that correct?
That is correct, and the reason being is the matching funds that we're utilizing for this went to the voters, and we passed a countywide capital facilities tax. So as part of our joint powers agreement, we agreed that existing districts that were in service at the time that cap tax was approved would not be required to pay a tap fee since they are contributing towards the matching funds for these types of projects. However, for any new development or district that is approved or requesting service after that vote, they do have to pay a fairly sizable tap fee.
What is that tap fee, Mike, do you know?
For just a 1-inch individual meter, we're probably $1,200. For most of these connections are about 2-inch or 3-inch. We're talking probably $20,000 to $30,000 for a tap fee.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you, Mike
Thank you,
and
Mr.
Levi,
Chairman.
for your presentation.
Next project under tab G is the Guernsey Transmission Pipeline 2020 project. Total project cost $3,080,000. The request was for 67% grant in the amount of $2,063,600. This project is to construct,
Yes. Did you skip Glen Rock?
probably did. I apologize.
They're all dressed up and they came. We ought to let them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Purcell, for pointing that out.
Thanks for keeping me honest. Let's go to tab F. Glen Rock Transmission Pipeline Project 2020. This is a recommendation for level 3 funding. Total project cost, $1,430,000. The request is for a 67% grant for the amount of $958,100. This project is to replace undersized and aged existing pipelines with 8-inch and 12-inch PVC transmission pipeline through town. I will open up for any questions or comments.
Mr. Chair, I'm Randy Rumpler, Public Works Director for the town of Glen Rock. This transmission line will go north and south and tie in our east and west transmission lines. We want to complete that system for better firefighting and safety of the public. We can't keep up with the water demand right now. Our wells are great, but we just need bigger pipes to continue on with our system. Next year's project after this one, we'll be bringing in another water line from our wells, which we only have one line. If that breaks, we have no water. So that'll be our next project after this one. So I'd entertain any questions.
I have one. Are you still utilizing the spring?
No, sir. We're all wells. We have 4 wells.
Thank you. Any questions by the commissioners for the sponsors? Any questions by the Select Water Committee? Okay. You guys,
I would like to thank you for your support and your funding. It helps us continue on with our projects. Thank you very much.
Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Get her built.
Now we'll go back to tab G for the Guernsey Transmission Pipeline Project. This is a level 3 project. Total project cost, $3,080,000. The request is for a 67% grant in the amount of $2,063,600. This project is to construct a new dedicated PVC pipeline from their, I believe their existing wells to their existing tank. I'll just note that there is some components of the total project that are considered maintenance, and that's work on the tank, and this funding recommendation does not include those costs.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank you for considering our project. My name is Matt Allred. I'm the town planner for the town of Guernsey. I have with me the clerk treasurer, Kate Farmer, and our consultant, Russ Dahlgren. This project is exactly as our sponsor described. It is installing a dedicated water line. We currently have a straw system that whenever in the rotation any of the wells turn on, they're pumping directly to the houses in town. So we have no ability to disinfect or treat the water in any capacity without overloading zones. So the water line will allow us that capability, as well as rehabbing the tank, which we have other funding for.
Does Camp
Commissioner
Jersey,
Geis.
does it have their own water system, or is that part of the town too?
No, they have their own independent water system. We were tied together at one point about 50 years ago. Mhm.
Any questions by the commission?
I have a question, Chairman. I see that you have
Here, click. You
See
have the
that you
floor.
have contingency funds, which is what, 342,000? No.
Yes, I believe that's.
I'll-
I have
You're not-
$602,919.41.
Contingency funds?
It's 15%.
Oh, that's kind of high for a percentage, but from what I understand. But, well, you're not looking at spending that?
No. Ideally, we won't have to touch that at all. That 15% number I actually took off of a couple of other projects that were funded by the commission. So I just reused the same wheel.
Thanks.
You mentioned you don't have a storage facility?
We do. We have an existing tank that will be rehabbed during this process.
That gives you enough detention time for your chlorination?
Yes, because we will have a dedicated line from the two wells at the south of town to the tank up at the north end of town and collecting well number 5 on the way up there. So 3 wells, and we have a 1-million-gallon storage tank.
That's gravity fed for distribution?
Yes, it is gravity fed. We also have a booster station that pumps the water to our industrial park.
Thank you. Any other questions by the commission?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, in reference to Commissioner Glick's question, the 15% contingency is a standard calculation on all of our requests. That's where that number comes from.
Thank you. The reason I just like to hear that, that they're not looking at spending that funding, looking at maybe doing modifications or something that, are minimal, that, we won't be able to track. I just want to make sure that, I just like to hear them say that they're not looking at spending that funding. That's all.
They wouldn't unless it's allocated. It'd have to be allocated to the project. It'd be something that's unforeseen in the document that would require that spending. And sometimes you get into some of it. I've seen it dipped into, but, basically it never, you don't use it all, or you got a real problem somewhere along the line in the engineering or the design or somewhere in something. So that's how I see it too, and I think that is our standard number. Anything to add?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that would have to be, any funds taken out of that contingency account would have to be approved through the office.
Any other questions? If not, we will proceed. Thank you, Matt and Case, and good luck with your project. Next item of business.
All right, under tab H, the next project is the Newcastle Water System Improvements Project. Total project cost is $170,000. They are requesting a 67% grant in the amount of $113,900. This project is for pump station upgrades that would, I believe, connect a new well that has been developed, replace a pump station that currently exists, and connect this new well to the system. And I will let the sponsor correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you've got the description of our project accurate. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Mike Moore. I'm the city engineer for Newcastle. Good morning to all. I guess this project is an important next step in the development of our Well 5. This will allow us to use the additional capacity of the well. And also in conjunction with this project, we want to add chlorination with our system and also add in a rock Y strainer to address problems that we've had in the past with rocks that we've drawn into our pumps. So with that, I guess that basically describes our project, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
So this hooks up the well that you drilled a year and a half ago, is that correct, to your system?
It's a what now?
This line hooks up the well that you drilled a year and a half ago?
We have a project that we are going to tie this well into our system, and this current project is another part of that project. But we are hooking that well in. Yeah.
You already have that going on. This is another one that you're utilizing.
We have that project going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions by the commissioners? For Mike, our sponsor.
They're wearing us down.
Okay. Mike, I guess there's no questions, so good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next project under tab I, Northwest Rural Water System Improvements Project. Total project cost is $1,010,000. The request is for a 67% grant in the amount of $606,700. This project is a replacement of 6 pumps and 3 pump stations that have exceeded or nearing their life expectancy. There was a study completed that recommended this replacement, I believe, as a priority project. I will turn it over to the sponsor.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, committee members, Mike Mackey, Northwest Rural Water District. This project replaces 6 pumps and 3 pump stations in the South Fork service area. The pumps are nearing the end of their estimated life. This is also upgrades to address growth too in the area. We've seen over the past 5 years the addition of about approximately 160 taps over the system wide, and so it is serving several purposes here.
So these are upgrades to your existing pumps that you have today, correct?
Correct. Also, we'll be moving to installation of SCADA improvements also as part of the project, so we can get the whole pump, the entire pump station at all 3 pump stations upgraded and up to date. So we should be in good shape for the next 25 to 30 years.
Was there any funds put aside to maintain these pumps during their lifespan?
Mr. Chairman, that's a very good question. I've been with the district for 5 years. When I arrived there, did a system replacement cost analysis. System replacement cost came in at an estimated $45 million. The district at that time only had $270,000 in reserves. We have, over the past 5 years, increased water rates approximately 25% to address that issue. We have a ways to go, but we have moved that reserve funds up to $2.1 million. So we're making progress there. And to avoid coming to you folks continually, which you've been very generous to the district over the years, to kind of answer a question of Senator Hicks's earlier, we did do pump station upgrades to the North Cody pump station. We did that entirely with SRF funding, so that we're not, we're trying to be less of a burden on the commission than we have to.
I appreciate the fact that you took, 5 years ago, you started a program knowing that those pumps were going to fail, so I compliment you for that. Any other questions by the commission for Mike, our sponsor? Yes, you have a question?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, you said
Yeah,
you had
fine.
increased those rates again by what percentage? Pardon? You would increase those rates by what percentage, sir?
Approximately 25%. We did give customers a year off last year because we did hit them pretty hard for 3 years. This year, we're looking at least a $1 per month increase, and we'll probably go, recommendation to the board will be to go at least $1 per month increase every year over the next at least 5 or 6 years. We have gotten to the point where we are reevaluating rates annually, where before it was, policy seems to have been just to try to get by with, the fewest amount of increases possible.
Thank you for the comment. Yeah, there is I don't know what your other funding sources would be, but there may be, in that there may be a contingency piece where you have to increase your rates. Is that right? Are you prepared to do that?
Board's been very good about that. I will also point out that we have, like I said, not to focus solely on the Water Development Commission. We've taken out 5 SRF loans over the past 5 years to address other maintenance issues too. Those loans due, half of those we have the principal forgiveness component, which has been helpful, but we're in, like I said, trying not to focus solely on the Water Development Commission for these and try to spread it around and have the district take responsibility for its own maintenance and continuing to improve its reserve accounts.
Thank you. Any other questions for our sponsor? With that, thank you, Mike. Good luck with your project.
Next project is the Sheridan Area Water Supply Transmission Project. Total project cost is $4,630,000. The request is for a 67% grant in the amount of $3,102,100. This project, I believe, came out of the 2019 Sheridan Master Plan Level 1 study as the highest priority project. This is identified as a key transmission main for both the Sheridan Area Water Supply Joint Powers Board and the City of Sheridan Water Systems. I will let the sponsor discuss it and answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Dan Coughlin. I'm the project manager for Sheridan Area Water Supply Joint Powers Board. Also, we have Dayton Alsecker here from Dowell, who did the master plan for Sheridan. Sheridan Area Water Supply has about 70% of its customers who are dependent on this transmission main, and it's reached the point where over the years it leaks, and if we have to shut it down, then we're going to put a lot of people out of water. So this is an assurance to be able to provide water to the majority of our customers.
Is the old existing line, was that steel cement lined? The one that's deteriorating on you?
Right, Mr. Chairman, it's ductile iron, so it has a cement mortar lining, but it had the exterior coating. Ductile iron in those days just was put in the ground basically, and that's the issue, is corrosion. It's had some catastrophic failures of 20-inch pipe at over 100 PSI that have failed, so it's been pretty spectacular in a couple occasions, but the problem is corrosion of ductile iron.
Did it have cathodic protection at the time it was put in?
No, it did not. That really wasn't done at that time period with ductile iron, I guess, so. right or wrong. Steel is better. I mean, steel at least would typically go in with more cathodic protection.
Any questions from our sponsor or their engineer? If not, you got an easy seat. Thank you, Dan. Dayton?
Next project under tab K. This is the last project in this block. This also is a project we discussed yesterday, the Sundance tank. The recommendation by the office was a do not fund on this project. We had a pretty good discussion yesterday. I can maybe answer anything from the discussion from yesterday if you would like. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the sponsor and let them discuss it.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and much like everyone else, I appreciate the role of Wyoming water development. We're kind of a success story in all this, with the exception of our water tank, which was my initiation to being mayor. I was mayor for about 3 months when I got the call that your tank's sliding off the hill, and there was a lot of people that gave me great advice, like tie a rubber hose to it and don't worry, but in fact, we didn't follow that advice, and hence we're here. We came to you guys, and we were in the process of getting money from Wyoming Water Development to do it, and FEMA, because we had a seismic activity and record rainfall that year, came in and declared an emergency and said, we're going to help you. And we went down the road of letting them pay a portion of the tank, which is that old analogy, you know, we're from the government and here to help. They didn't help us, guys. They came in, they said, we'll give you this money and you're going to do it. At the time, we'd had a fire several years earlier where we lost a portion of our downtown, and without our main water tank, our system's set up so our water tank that's on the hill feeds all the other tanks in our system. That tank, when it goes offline, the rest of the tanks don't have water, which, you know, limits our fire protection. I worked for the phone company, is my full-time job, been there 37 years. I worked during that period, I worked till lunch, and I met with people during the lunch hour, and I met with people after work trying to find a place to put a water tank. And most people liked the fact they had water, nobody wanted a water tank. We had public meetings, you know, to quote the guy, my friends from Sheridan, who talk about the only thing I remember about the public meetings were the people were angry and they ate the cookies. That's it. That's what I remember. And we went down the road of doing it. Nobody wanted us. At that point, we were on the verge or on the cusp of getting a rare earth mine. The Forest Service said, we'll help you. We'll put the mine out 2 years, but we will get you a tank on our property, and I elected to say no. I'm not putting the county's growth and development on hold to get a water tank. And so we persisted in contacting people, and we finally found a lady who didn't really want our water tank, but she would take it. And we breathed a sigh of relief, and we went down the road of moving our water tank, getting our fire protection back, and doing this and that. And then, as you guys are aware, 3 years later, the federal government came back and said, you didn't do a NEPA, and so we're not going to fund this thing. And it puts us in the hole at, you know, some $250,000 because they were there to help us. You know, we would have been in much better shape to not seek that outside finance, do a 66-33 split with Wyoming Water Development and never done anything with FEMA. That being said, you know, Kathy's been to Washington, D.C. We have met with Enzi Cheney, Senator Enzi, Representative Cheney, and Senator Barrasso concerning what do we do. We've lost all those appeals. I understand that you guys' function is to fund projects going forward, not refunding things in the past, but our rates are fairly high, and with the garbage problems we have and this and that, it's impacting the folks on our town. You know, we're looking at and Kathy will bring you up to speed on our rates here real soon, but we have fairly high rates at this time, and now we're talking about adding another $8 a month to our bill. You know, that we're really close to the $100 mark now. We're going to be at that $100 mark and all that, and it's just, it's a bad deal. I don't want to be here, and I know you guys don't want me here, but that's where we're at.
We'll take you.
Well, and I appreciate it. You know, we could talk about the successes. When I became the mayor, we had, I think, one fire hydrant that met the old building code. With the 80 you guys in Wyoming Water Development, I think we're up to like 23, and we meet the IBC standard of 1,500 gallons a minute. Now, some of that was trial by fire, right? They built an elementary school and said, hey, we put the elementary here. What do you got for fire protection? Well, we don't even have water in the neighborhood, right? We had the DOT build a complex at the south end of town, which gave us the opportunity to use your help and consensus money and loop our system, which got us a lot of water in a lot of places. But it wasn't really our goal. We didn't wake up and brush our teeth and say, hey, we get to loop our water system today. It just, you know, it came to us, and we came to you guys, and you've helped us. And with that, we have improved our water system, and we're doing what we're doing, but we are kind of caught in a bind with this $250,000. And Kathy's taking notes all day. I would never take on a job she can't do. I want to make that clear, so I'm going to let her tell you about the financial aspect.
Thank you, Mayor Brooks. Chairman, Commission, I want to echo Mayor Brooks. I am Kathy Lenz. I am the clerk treasurer, and I want to echo the mayor's appreciation for all that you've done for us. I also wanted to say that we all know the facts that happen in this, but I want to be like Paul Harvey just for a minute, as long as you gave me the mic. I appreciate that. Thank you. What's that? Yeah, the rest of the story. We all know there was two things that we missed on the FEMA. That one was we didn't notify them that we were moving the tank. Two was the NEPA. And that's 11 years later. It was 2011 when this happened. And so that's when Commissioner Purcell was sitting here with us. So it was a while ago. But we never intentionally did not do these FEMA items. We had a representative from FEMA, the federal FEMA, which at the time, as Mr. Brooks says, we were new. We didn't know the difference between Homeland Security Wyoming and federal FEMA. And this gentleman was at the site. He was with us and the engineers when we couldn't stabilize the site, and we made the decision that we needed to move it. And we looked at the Forest Service section, and it wasn't until a year later, they said, oh, you needed to write that to them. So we did, we put it in, but it was after the fact. Now, to the NEPA part of it, there was one line email that says, you need to do a NEPA. And of course, a NEPA. So we went to the Forest Service. We met in a table with about 10 of us there, engineers, Forest Service, and they said exactly that. They'd put rare earth on hold. They would do the NEPA for us, and it was all decided in there. If we moved to private property, we didn't have to do a NEPA. So that is why we moved to private property. It wasn't any other reason than that. Never again, not another word, until just last year when they said you didn't do those items. And we never had a representative from the state on our site. They were drowned in, I'm sure, at their point, because they had this water catastrophe. And so Homeland Security in Cheyenne, they were missing, they had staff we started with, then we got a new guy. And all of our forms, all our pay requests went through just like they were supposed to. We had no idea we made a mistake. And that's the rest of the story. It was not intentional. And we just wanted to be able to say that to you, and we appreciate you letting us speak today.
I do have a couple of comments. One is, you got the money, the $225,000. Now, the other side of the story is, what if you don't pay it back? Just start making payments on the $225,000. Who is going to come in and sue you for that purpose? And I guess maybe that's the other way around. There's attorneys in the house or whatever, but that's what I would do. I'd see how far it went.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, the governor has sent former Senator Christensen to impress upon us the state's desire for us to repay this. And I don't know what that looks like if you don't pay it, but we had a very nice lunch before he dropped the bomb that he wasn't buying lunch or giving us a pass on his tank. I wish he was running for something at that point, because I'd have thrown in behind him, but in fact, he was working for the governor, and they're fairly emphatic that this money is going to be justified.
That's right, but here's the deal, make payments on it.
Well, make
And we're
payments.
still paying it back, so we're not,
We submitted a plan to them, actually. They've impressed upon us our due diligence, and that what kind of our plan is to raise every water bill in Sundance $8 a month for 5 years. Now, we're taking 3% and 4% raises on our, we had a rate, okay, prior to me, we had a giant commingled, I want to throw out a couple, 3 facts just for educational purposes. Prior to me, we had a commingled budget. You know, there wasn't good estimates from the state. The money didn't come regularly, and this and that. The mayor immediately before me hired Kathy because he could see that the town was falling in and we needed to go down the road of hiring a grant writer, raising our rates, and trying to fix the town. What we found in that whole fix, and I'm telling you this because it's empirical data, and that is as we dig it up to fix things, whether it's a park or a daycare, we find out how bad our infrastructure is, and we're fairly savvy. You know, we do a fairly good job of bringing money in. A lot of these towns are like us, but they're a time bomb and have no idea what they're sitting on. So I tell you that just because that is a fact. I tell you at about 2,100 people you can live without direct distribution, which is kind of a big part of our formula for succeeding in our town. So when I tell you $5 to $8, what did you say our rate? Our rate right now is over $40 a month for water. We're going to be very, very close to the $50 mark, if not slightly over, to do this $8 surcharge on water to pay this tank off.
Or lose direct distribution.
Yeah.
yes, Senator.
I can probably do a little explanation that goes beyond that a little bit, back to FEMA. The money actually came out of Homeland Security in Wyoming. It did not come out of FEMA. It was a reimbursable, and they refused to reimburse it. So we're stuck in one level or another. I've been to the governor's office multiple times over this and visited with Homeland Security, and the bottom line is, if they don't get reimbursed, their budget gets hit by $300,000, and it puts them underwater. And so hence the trip for ex-Senator Christensen up to tell them that we're going to draw blood out of you. And so both them and myself have gone full circle asking every single entity to do it. I also got somewhat cranky with all of it, and the fact that a whole lot of entities dropped the ball as far as the NEPA went. It wasn't just Sundance. Homeland Security missed it, Water Development, everybody missed the deal all the way through, and it didn't get caught till it was done. And that left absolutely no one that they could stick holding the bag but Sundance. And that was why we got where we got yesterday and how this happened. And it's the strangest deal I've ever seen, but my first water meeting with Director Purcell was over the Sundance tank. So it's been full circle with me as well. That was my very first meeting, was the Sundance tank slid off the hill, and they came to me and said, what can you do? And I will tell you, at that time, Director Purcell held my hand and told me, I can't tell you this, but I'm going to tell you what to ask for. I don't know if you remember that.
He's a charming fellow and above average.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman? Yes. I'm trying to track all of this. So if Kathy, I think Kathy's the one to take this assignment, give us a summary statement as to where we are right now.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Dockstader, we owe $225,000 to the state of Wyoming, and Governor Gordon has assigned us to repay that. And to do that, we, like you said, we've shaken every tree, we've been to every entity, because because of we only have 700 users, and so we don't have a savings for that. And we either came up with a payment plan, or they took our direct distribution, which pays for all of our police and our fire, and that was not an option for Mayor Brooks. And so we're here in front of you today because we need $225 to pay this back.
I can get you $225.
Yeah, $225, yeah.
This is slightly bigger than past that.
And ask us to leave.
To follow up on my question, have you proposed a payment plan to?
$8 a month ahead for 5 years.
No, to pay back
To the
the Homeland Security. Have you presented a payment plan to them?
Yes, we have. That's where the $8 a month a subscriber for 5 years comes from.
Okay, so would they allow you to make payments on that for that period of time?
Well, they can't very well, Governor Meade, we went to SLIB just before this discussion, and Governor Meade at that time said they probably will not repossess your town, but you're going to have to do something. I mean, we've fallen this classic conundrum is everybody, SLIB and everybody, wants to fund projects. They don't want to fund something that happened in the past, right? And there's no provisions in the SLIB guidelines. There's no provisions in anything to go backwards. You guys are under the same dilemma also of this. And at the end of the day, it's my responsibility. I'm the mayor of the town. I am the guy at the end of the day where the buck stops. But I got to tell you, there was a plethora of lawyers involved, whether it was the Attorney General's office, through SLIB, through Water Development, through Homeland Security, our attorneys, our engineers' attorneys, the people that oversaw the project. There was an oversight, and we're being punished for that oversight, and at the end of the day, there's one guy responsible, and that's me, and I'm the one who's going to have to face the public and tell him, you know what, there was a mistake made. I was the mayor during that mistake, and it's going to cost you guys $8 a head or $8 a meter a month. That's a tough thing to swallow when there's all kinds of people that, you work full-time, then there's a lot of people upstream from you that you rely on that have kind of washed their hands. And I mean, it's not like I don't get their Christmas card, but it's kind of a lonely feeling being me right here, right now.
Mr. Chairman, that's back to what they had actually went back to their settlement. The discussion was, I think I had one with you folks, with the governor, and a couple without, with our previous governor. And his recommendation is what we did yesterday. He said, let it run its route, and their last Hail Mary is for you to come back and amend the water bill, which is what I was told to do, and that's why you saw my frustration yesterday, because I was told bluntly that that was the route to take. And that was what I'd told us at the Buffalo meeting was, he said, just go in and amend the bill and explain to everybody what happened. Because there is no other fix other than to ask the appropriations to add the money back into Homeland Security and have them not pay it, and he did not like that option. So that's where we ended up at, and I think Sundance is a little outside. I didn't get a chance to visit with him, but that's really what the fix will be is we will amend the water bill. Everyone knows it up front. And then we're going to have to shepherd it through both sides of the legislature, which is going to require help of everybody to do it.
Well, and that's why we're here. I mean, we know you guys are hands are tied, but I think everybody in this room needs to hear this story, because I'll bet you before it's all said and done, you're going to hear it again. I don't think that, that we're so special or unique that this is not going to become an issue for somebody else somewhere else. And the problem is, I think when we talk to the SLIB board individually and then at the meeting, the problem is legally their hands are bound because in fact it says projects going forward, not refunding things that happened in the past. But the ratepayers in Sundance deserve my all, and that's what they're getting.
So according to Driscoll's comment, if you do that, it'll be legislature this year, February, January.
Chairman, yes, sir. Yeah, we'll amend this.
The other question I have, are they charging you interest on the money that you have that belongs so to them?
As of right now, as long as I continue to throw Hail Marys, they're giving us a little bit of latitude. I don't believe that latitude will last. You know, I understand the direct appropriations through JAC, but that's a lot of legwork for a little bitty town. Kathy's got a lot of leg on her, but, you know, I'd really like to see it become more a part of the omnibus water bill or something like that than try to go to the legislature and you know, spend a lot of our time in Cheyenne trying to get this thing through. We're kind of a one-horse town. We don't have, you know, these bigger towns have the latitude to have staff do things. Staff is right here. I'm on a vacation day and she's away from the things that she normally does, like send out water bills and so forth.
Mr. Chairman, it's still in the commission's field, but I'm with Senator Driscoll. We just take this and work this through the session, get it taken care of, and help Sundance out.
Good for everybody?
I think we settled that yesterday. We just didn't have everybody here. Senator Dockstader missed, and I think we're all in agreement. That's what we're going to do. I just wanted to make it really clear that the commission understood it, because we've had some difficulties about amending that bill before, and I wanted to make dang sure that everybody understood why we were doing it, what we were doing, so I don't end up on a conference call again that we're going beyond your guys' wishes. And we've tried pretty hard. I think the rest of the legislative committee's tried hard to follow closely with the commission since we had our falling out, 3-4 years ago.
Does that satisfy your request, or where we're at today, or where they would be for you as far as getting you going and getting that loan repaid? Does that work?
Absolutely.
Senator Hicks?
Mr. Chairman, I defer to Commissioner Purcell. Then I have a few comments, not specific, but to the broader scope of this issue.
Purcell, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, to the extent we missed the idea that federal funding fell under the federal nexus, I apologize. But I don't think we were alone. We all jumped off that cliff, we held our hands, and off we went. The second thing I'd like to say is, this doesn't reflect on the other sponsors, but this was the most entertaining presentation I've ever seen. But the dilemma we are in is this paying for previous obligations, of which there will be, if we started saying, go ahead and build it and then come to us for funding, the line would be down in the lobby. And so I'm very nervous about that precedent. I am very sympathetic to your cause, and I apologize to any extent we caused it, but the reality is I'm going to have to support the motion of no funding.
Or you say something.
Mr. Chairman, so this reminds me a little bit of a deal we got into with Pavilion. Remember the Pavilion tanks? And one of the engineering firms that wasn't used to doing any bidding underbid the job, forgot something. And in that particular case, we decided we weren't going to fund it, back fund the deal. I was on the dissenting side. I felt like we probably should have. And I'm looks like I'm on the prevailing side. I do think that we need to help Sundance out, probably any city that gets into this pickle. One question that I wanted to be clear on, these attorneys that missed the NEPA evaluation and the things that you thought you were doing correctly, those were Wyoming attorneys, people involved, not just federal. Am I correct?
Oh, no, I don't know that anyone federally ever looked at it. I know that Wyoming Water Development had the AG's office look at it. I know that the Homeland Security folks had the AG's office. I know that our engineers at Tri-Hydro, their attorneys are in state. So no, this is not a federal thing. We would have been so much better off if the feds had never showed up. You know, we would have paid the 33%, we'd have built it into the rate, and we would have moved on, and it wouldn't have been $8. I mean, that is a fact. Mr. Purcell, I have absolutely no animosity. I totally understand what the rules are, and I know this is a Hail Mary from way back, and so, no, I think you guys did your job and did fabulous. It's just a terrible spot for me to be in personally.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman. So I don't know if the mayor has insider information or whether he's just clairvoyant, but we have another little FEMA project out there that happened up in Fremont County that's now having some issues with our federal partners in FEMA and the way the documents were construed. We have no idea what the outcome of that's going to be, but we very well may be back in this situation next year discussing this issue. And that's not the point that I want to bring up, but I think the point that the mayor made, we're going to be in this position again. We would be absolutely remiss if we don't learn from them and then do something about it. So, and I think the governor has taken the first step to do this. Last year, he had requested of the legislature to put kind of an ombudsman in the Office of State Land and Investment, particularly to help small communities that lack the technical expertise to do this. But what I would suggest when we know these issues arise with the technical and professional staff that we have with water development and these other agencies, that if we're going to get in bed with the feds on anything, that there is due diligence and additional scrutiny put on by the other agency staff in addition to this. And that's just a moving forward. Standard operating procedure is if anybody comes in and we're looking at FEMA, or let's just throw the Bureau of Reclamation in there too for sake of argument, that we need to do a little more due diligence on what those federal guidelines and stipulations are going to be on the strings attached to their money. 'Cause we certainly don't want to be doing this again, but I think it's just a lesson learned. But let's make sure that we do something about the lesson that we learned.
And that'll be addressed through your staff, is that right? You think, what's your next step for what Larry just talked about?
I might have to ask some questions on that, Mr. Chairman, but when it gets to a level 3 contract, that contract is typically between the sponsor and the engineering company. So how we provide checks and balances on that, I think we need to put our head around a little bit. Mr. Purcell, is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, here is my frustration. When a sponsor comes to us and wants our money, we tell them A to Z what they have to do to get our money. And when the 33% is coming from federal funds, we assume that funding agency is doing the same damn thing. But in this case, it doesn't appear that they are. So I think, unfortunately, when we have federal funds involved, we're going to have to help the sponsor or make sure the sponsor is aware of the hooks. Because there are hooks. Anything federal, anything called this federal nexus. It opens you up to ESA, it opens you up to Clean Water Act, it opens you up to things. Do you really, really, really want to do business with the federal government? We have a perfectly good loan program here. But the reality is, if that's where they want to go, I think we're going to have to say, now, do you understand the rules of that federal funding? And if you don't, please do. And it's I don't know how far our job goes, because the sponsor has some responsibility for their funding requests. But you know, the moral to the story is, if you can avoid the federal government, do it. But we're past that now.
Okay, we will take that into consideration through the Water Development Commission, if that could happen in the future. So it is a real deal. I know as a mayor myself, and I know how tough these things are when you got to ask the public for additional funds, especially to this magnitude. It's a real crisis. So with what's going on over here, good luck. Thank you, Paul and Kathy, for your presentation. I wish we could do more, but our hands are tied too, so good luck.
I do have a question before you turn on this.
Okay, Senator Moniz.
I see according to the information that your average monthly water bill is $40.51. Is that correct? And have you reached any kind of a payment plan agreement with Homeland Security?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Mons, no, we have not yet. We haven't stalled, but we've kicked every rock, and so we have not. We've offered ones with them, but they haven't agreed to them yet.
So
The last one, they gave us 15 days, and we told them that we had put in an application with you folks. And so they're waiting the outcome. I'm sure they will be on our doorstep when we get home.
So did I hear right that you were thinking about an $8 additional fee?
Correct.
And do you have to go through any kind of a notice process with that, or can you assess that fee tomorrow if you had to?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, the council, the mayor and council has that right to assess that immediately. It's not popular, but they do have that ability.
So at the risk of not getting Christmas cards from all your residents, why haven't you initiated that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, we were hopeful that there would be another choice and not have to do that to our elderly 700 users. You know, we have a transfer station that our rates are going up on. I mean, it's not just a water situation. And to put that kind of strain on elderly community, we just felt it was our due diligence to do anything we could before we assess that to them.
I guess the only reason I'm asking that is it would be nice when we end up dealing with this in the legislature that we have all the information available to us. But I would think that it would be in your best interest to at least initiate some sort of a plan, a repayment plan. My other question was, is this an interest-free loan, or are they going to assess interest based on that? We've been doing some quick math here. We figured $8, it would take about three and a half years to pay that back. That's interest-free. Have they suggested whether it's going to be interest-free? Are they going to charge you interest on the money?
I think our plan that we submitted is there is some interest to it, and we're looking at more 4 to 5 years.
Or 5 years?
It's a lot. I mean, our monthly bill is going to be, we're going to be in the over $100 range, which, you know, I'm going to tell you, senior citizens, you're not going to get to see me a whole lot longer. I'll take the hit. No, I'm dead serious about this. I'll take the hit in the paper, and I've told them that. You know, I'm going to take the bullet for the team on this deal, and that's what's going to happen. I didn't really want to be a career politician anyway, but I can assure you, when we get to that $100 mark in our community, it's not going to be something that the public is widely accepting of. I mean, you know, we've got a lot of elderly folks that live there, and elderly folks do a couple things. One is vote, and the other is watch their money. And so, in fact, you know, we're going to do that. The other part of it is, and it's really easy for everybody to say, hey, you're going to throw this $8 on. I have to have 4 councilmen agree with that, or the majority. I have to have 2, plus me. And that's probably the way it's going to do. We have a lady that's a councilman that works for senior citizens. She's certainly not going to support this. I have a guy that's in business. He's very likely not going to support it. I have 2 other councilmen that have some insulation to the public because they're employed like myself, and then I'll split the vote. But this is not one of those things that's really going to be popular. And you know, when we hear the final no, I'm going to go to them and I'm going to say, here's the deal. I'm going to take the bullet too. You guys got to help me on this, and we'll do that, so.
Well, Paul, one other comment that I would have, being the direction maybe that anonymous bill, and I'm not telling you that you should have it, but if they're all here today, and they could vote to give you a letter. They wouldn't have to vote, but to give you a letter so that you can get the monkey off your back temporarily.
Well, ultimately, the buck stops here. I mean, the lawyers made a mistake. There was mistakes made all the way through this thing. Ultimately, I am the mayor at the point of it. I believe that it's my duty to take that because that's what they voted me to do. I was voted in to take the best care I could of the people of the city of Sundance, and that's what I'm trying to do.
I'm talking about the monkey of your money that you still have that they want back. That's what I'm talking about. And I don't know if they want to address that, but that might be a good thing to have as a document right now, that if they commit to do that, or at least a letter that that's where it may go, might help you out.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Driscoll.
Mayor Brooks, should you have to add the $8, what kind of reserves do you have left if you have any kind of wreck in the city? What's the next deal if you have a water main failure or another tank failure or anything? What do you guys have sitting there?
We don't have any money sitting there. The city of Sundance, the day I took over, was broke, and I've successfully managed it for almost 10 years, and we're still broke. And that's a fact. I'd like to tell you guys, it's not, if you're 2,100 people, direct distribution goes in a savings account if you manage your city well. We are a well-managed city. We just don't have the resources. Our slush fund is sales tax, right? And that's 1.4 cents of the first 4 cents. The 5th cent was some restriction. And we have a 6th cent that is in place right now for capital facilities. But, you know, we've been using that money to work on infrastructure. We've got a fairly liberal interpretation from our county attorney, and we've used that money for town improvements. We don't have a savings account. We're not that town, you know. To put it in perspective, and I was president of the WAM organization, I have a fairly good knowledge of how the sales tax works. Sales tax works if you have a railroad siding and you're in an off-load position. You know, there are folks in this room that have a fairly decent rail yard within their city limits, and while they may complain about it, the stuff that gets offloaded, fuel, iron, things like that, they get some sales tax on. We don't have that. You know, the biggest thing we have, probably if you built a pie chart of the city of Sundance's sales tax, it's T-shirts during the motorcycle rally.
Yes, Senator Alzolmi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I was doing calculations, but it wasn't just, I was just trying to figure out how much it would be. I think the fact that these people are elderly, they live on fixed income, and they're paying a fortune, in their minds, $100 a month for them is a lot, when some of these counties are paying, and we're funding it out of water, funding this money to other counties are paying $30 a month. I just don't think it seems fair. And Gillette has a $190 million water project, another $5 million one before us, and poor Sundance, what are they getting? I think it's a sin that they had no direction, no guidance, they're small, and they need help. And I think either A, the Water Commission should bend its rules and vote yes to approve this project. It's not a huge amount. I mean, we're doing millions and millions of dollars today. Or B, we do as Senator Hicks suggested and use Article 16, Section 10 of the Constitution to say that we have the power to approve in whole and in part and fix this problem. But I don't think listening to the story of the sad plight of senior citizens, it's just not right. These people lived here forever in Wyoming. I bet you a lot of them have lived forever in Wyoming, and we need to help them.
16, Section 10.
Thank you for that comment. I believe at this time, I mean, we can talk about Sundance Tank all day long.
Mr. Chairman, just before we leave this, I have one question, and then based on the answer to the question, suggestions. So did I understand that with your current distribution system that you provide water to WYDOT, is that correct?
WYDOT built a new campus down there, a scale house. They converted their maintenance building to be the DOT Center for the Highway Patrol and the driver's license, and then built in this large maintenance shop there. which is all nice, but they built it in a spot, once again, where we didn't really have fire protection, and we used our consensus money at that point to loop our system, which then allowed us to provide fire protection to them, yes.
There's no actual tap there at their facilities, it's just a hydrant for fire protection?
Oh, no, they have it. They're a water user for us.
Okay, well, that was, so just something to consider. I think the town has the authority to set different rates, and maybe you want to set a rate for household, one for industrial users, and then one for state government. Maybe you could adjust that rate to come out to somewhere in the next 5 years, about $225,000.
Yeah, there's some restrictions on what we can do with in-town and out-of-town users, and probably the DOT would fall under that.
Mr. Chairman, so I'm House Chairman of Transportation, and believe me, they're not made of money, and they're kind of in the same boat as Water Development and everybody else. Thanks, Larry.
Okay, proceeding, I will turn it back to,
Thank you, Sundance.
Thank you, guys.
thank you,
Thank you.
Paul and Kathy, for the report. Feel for you. We'll see what we
Mr.
can
Chairman,
do. Somehow.
to
Go
answer
ahead.
your question, we'll put our heads together to think of ways that we can help with the checklist, or just make sure that people understand what they're getting into with their additional funding. We'll try to figure out the best way to handle that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, are we ready for a motion?
Are we all through with all of our projects?
That is the first complete block, yes, sir.
And there was no recommendation to pull any out?
Not yet, well, they can yet,
Yes. Okay.
but,
So do you want to make that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make the recommendation that we accept the director and staff recommended funding for the new development program Level 3 projects.
Been moved and seconded. What I would like to do then is go back, and if there's any questions on any of the list of projects, give the board, if we made notes, got any questions, allow you to go back and ask questions on any of them.
The motion would be to accept all these.
Right.
Right.
But you want to, any of these, you asked any of these, do you want to remove one of this to be voted on separate?
I don't know, do we want to remove any to be voted on separate? Your motion was to accept them all.
Mr. Chairman, my motion was to accept them all, but we would accept an amendment to pull them out from that consensus vote, vote on what's left, and then have a separate vote, and more discussion and a separate vote on the rest, on any that they wanted to address separately.
With that said, is there any discussion on any of them?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a comment, maybe more of in the form of a question, or hopefully it reflects concern about fiscal responsibility rather than my inexperience on the commission. But when I look through all these requests and I see monthly rates that vary from $12.45 per month to $62.25 a month, it seems to me like, I know there's differences in cost of living in Wyoming towns, and also there's differences in complexities in water systems, but I just wonder if we've ever, and maybe it's a question for the office as well, if we've ever looked at that variability. And, some of these projects are asking for millions of dollars, and they might be charging $25 a month, and somebody might be asking for a couple $100,000 and they're charging $60 a month.
That's a very good point, and it's really probably hard to control different water systems. Like it was mentioned earlier, some wells are shallow, some are deep, some have more expense to maintain there, and the age of the system is also a factor in where we should be. I think the real thing that we should look at is just to make sure that they have enough contingency and that they're building for replacement costs instead of coming to the Wyoming Water Development Commission every time they have an issue as far as some of the maintenance and replacement costs are concerned. So, yeah, I agree. I think they're scattered all over. When you look at $1.50 per 1,000 gallon, I'd love to live there for that reason, but that may be the only one. I don't know that. But there's a widespread, and I think there always has been. Some of these projects that we fund have new tanks, like, for instance, the town of Pine Haven, new well and new tanks. Yeah, our water rates went up. We did it over some increments. We did it over $3 a year for 3 years. That's how we got where we got. But, so yeah, I think there is a variable. And there's no really, if you look at your peers, you can look at the peers within the area, and maybe that quantifies, like Jackson, we just heard that today, is comparable to the $1.50 because they got water flowing out of the hills, you know. I mean, they got water. Gillette, don't have it. Cheyenne gets it off the rim, you know, so there's all kinds of variables in the rates, and that's what creates that. Okay, so what we have is a motion and a second on all these projects. Are any of them that anyone wants to pull? Any other discussion that relates to these projects?
Mr. Chairman, call for the question.
Question's been called for, so does someone want to make a motion?
I already did.
You did. Okay, then we will have a vote. All those in favor of all of these projects signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Cheeseburger. Oh,
That was the other comment that I wanted to make. It's noon or thereabouts. It's up to the consensus of everybody here whether we want to take a break and get a sandwich. There's a kind of a restaurant below us here that has sandwiches, all kinds of food. They do and are prepared for us, or are preparing for our numbers, if we want to go down and do that. So it's a consensus of the commission.
Send them down there and be back at 1 o'clock.
That work for everyone? So we'll take a lunch break and go into our next session.
Change the order for you guys. There's also a cafeteria downstairs with a full-service grill and everything else.
Yes, we're all entitled to that utility.
Send a little beaver dam stuff your
Thank you.
direction.
So that's where we're at. We'll take a break.
till 1 o'clock?
See everybody at 1 o'clock.
Righty, here we go.
Give us much